Chapter 741, In the Mist. Just as the continuous explosions came to an end, Aislinn changed again. Tyrande suddenly realized that the protection of the moon god, which had surrounded her for so long, had suddenly disappeared. This abrupt change made Tyrande, who was accustomed to the guardianship of the moon god, feel a sense of discomfort and emptiness. According to the law of energy balance in the universe, the divine power flowing from Tyrande would inevitably appear somewhere else. She looked up and saw that the moon in the sky seemed brighter and brighter, as if a new power had been injected into it. Immediately afterward, she noticed a layer of white fog quietly filling the air around her. Soon, the entire city was surrounded by a hazy and unknown mist. This is Ethan's method. Tyrande immediately realized the reason for the situation. In Aislinn, apart from me, he is the only one who has the ability to mobilize such a huge power of the moon god. As Elune herself said, she cannot stay in the material world for long. The divine power she left on me as protection was the last ripple in 10 moves. Now, the sudden disappearance of this protection is actually because Ethan is actively calling Elune, praying for her divine power to come. Of course, Ethan was not seeking personal asylum. His goal was more ambitious. He wanted to use the power of the moon god to temporarily disable even part of the function of this huge mystery that covers the entire Aislinn. It was enough to change the entire situation of the battle. Elune's divine power was undoubtedly extraordinary and powerful. The mythical locks in Aislinn City were so strong that even demons were helpless when they encountered them. But even this barrier, illuminated by the bright moonlight, actually showed traces of flaws, and its control over the city quietly weakened. The powerful mystical lock, which even the devil could not stop, showed its flaws under the moonlight and lost part of its control over the city. It was this subtle flaw that provided Ethan with a glimmer of opportunity. He cleverly used this gap to create thick fog that filled half of the city. However, this fog did not become an obstacle to Tyrande and her party. Instead, it unexpectedly became their ally, providing them with a secret cover to help them escape from danger. The priestess concentrated on following the warriors who rescued her, galloping all the way without daring to slack off. But the wheel of fate would not always be in their favor. Soon they encountered an obstacle. A group of ferocious hell beasts appeared in front of them. These creatures were the Hounds of the Burning Legion. They resembled large hyenas, and the tentacles on their backs had the strange ability to absorb magic. For spellcasters, they were undoubtedly deadly nemeses. Faced with this sudden threat, a female mage reacted quickly. She lightly threw an object, which at first seemed to be an inconspicuous short wooden stick. However, when the wooden stick was about to touch the target, it instantly stretched and lengthened, turning into a sharp spear and piercing the hell beast's chest. The rest of the hell beasts were not spared. They all suffered similar fatal blows and fell down wailing. A few hell beasts tried to run away in fear, but how could Dathrema let them go so easily? He quickly sent out a fireball, accurately hitting 2 of the beasts that were fleeing for their lives. In the deafening explosion, the bodies of the 2 hell beasts were blown to pieces, and the fragments rained down on the fleeing upper elves like a storm. Despite this, a cunning hell beast escaped their pursuit. "Hurry, before we are discovered," Dathrema roared. "Let's speed up." At that moment, a low and solemn horn sounded in the distance. Under the silvery light of the moon, several gloomy black figures swayed faintly in front of the team. "Sarasnagak!" Dathrema roared. "Noir Tyson, come to me quickly." The 2 moved upon hearing the sound and arrived at Dathrema's side almost immediately. Instantly, the 3 clenks hid their fists and began to recite incantations in low voices, summoning the power of arcane magic. In the blink of an eye, a dazzling red energy beam burst forth from in front of them. The light was sharp and hot, as if it could cut through any obstacle. Even Tyrande, the priest, could feel the powerful energy drawn from the Well of Eternity. In the misty haze, a row of majestic moon guards loomed, like ghostly warriors, attacking the fugitives with relentless pursuit. Each of these moon guards was an elite battle mage who had undergone rigorous training. They held staffs and wore silver armor, moving with precision and discipline. In past battles between the Dark Knight Empire and surrounding races, these spellcaster troops often exerted overwhelming pressure. However, in the eyes of high-level mages, their power seemed insignificant, and their spells were like children's toys, eclipsed by the true powerhouses. When the moon guards in front touched the seemingly weak red energy barrier, their bodies were suddenly enveloped in blazing flames. Like ignited gasoline, the flames licked their bodies voraciously, consuming them in the inferno. Wails echoed as the moon guards, engulfed by the flames, struggled in vain. After a while, their bodies were reduced to ashes in the intense heat, leaving only a few pieces of burned and distorted armor, a silent testament to the tragedy of this battle. However, the following moon guards did not flinch and continued to charge forward, undeterred by the fate of their comrades. At the same time, the surrounding demons began to move, drawn by the scent of blood. They gathered to surround the escapees, and the war was about to break out. Spells and swordlight intertwined, creating a thrilling scene of chaos and confrontation. In the midst of the battle, a burly demon cunningly attempted to sneak attack Dathrima from behind while he was distracted. However, Tyrande's keen eyes caught the movement. Undaunted, she calmly drew the sword beside her and prayed to the moon goddess Elune, asking for the power to kill with 10 strikes. The sword shone brightly in Tyrande's hand, radiating the silver light of the moon goddess. She grasped the hilt tightly and swung it towards the demon with incredible speed and force. The demon guard only had time to let out a muffled groan before his body turned stiffly under the influence of inertia. Before he could fully turn around, the upper half of his body fell weakly. With the blessing of divine power, Tyrande's sword was so precise that the demon did not even realize he was dead. Dathrima, unaware of the approaching danger, hurriedly called out to his 2 comrades. Tyrande stood aside, observing as they quickly constructed a bright magic shield. The shield expanded rapidly, covering a wider area and glowing with a more dazzling blue light than before. Suddenly, there was a crackling sound in the air as a demon rushed towards the newly formed shield. He was abruptly pushed back by an invisible force, as if thrown by a catapult. The demon fell heavily among his companions, his body instantly shattering into powder and dissipating in the air. This scene demonstrated that, compared to traditional fire spells, force field spells were more deadly when fighting demons. Soon, the enemies in this wave of attacks were defeated, suffering heavy casualties. Dathrima looked around, a trace of cruelty flashing in his eyes. "Don't leave anyone alive," he whispered to his companions. "Although we are masked, we must be cautious. We cannot let any enemy have the opportunity to reveal our secrets." After silencing all witnesses, they continued to move forward. Moving forward cautiously, they navigated through countless hardships. Just as they reached the edge of the civilian area, their brief moment of peace was shattered. A sudden, heart-wrenching scream pierced the air near Tyrande. She turned to see a young, upper-class female elf, writhing in pain on her mount, before vanishing into thin air like a ghost. The scream abruptly ceased, and a lifeless body fell from the fleeing group of elves, landing on the cold stone road. Panic spread among the night elves, their wary eyes darting around in fear. Tyrande quickly turned and saw a pair of sharp claws attempting to seize a male elf. Fortunately, the male elf was agile enough to narrowly evade the fatal strike. "It's the Doomguard," Tyrande shouted to her companions. "Be careful. The Doomguard is lurking in the Minister of Garden Chi." No sooner had she spoken than a pair of claws reached out from beside her, trying to drag her into the darkness. Reacting swiftly, Tyrande gripped her sword tightly and swung it with all her might. The long sword, enchanted by the power of the moon god, sliced through the arm effortlessly, like a hot knife through butter. A scream echoed as the Doomguard, caught off guard by her decisive counterattack, retreated, leaving only a severed arm behind before disappearing into the thick fog. Priestess Tyrande turned her gaze to Dathrimar, seeking guidance or assistance, but found none. Dathrimar and the other upper elves were now ensnared in a quagmire, struggling to move. Chapter 742. The Stuck Point Appears. Originally, these Doomguards were sent to hunt down Ethan, but at this moment they have become the most troublesome problem for this group of elves. These demons flying in the air are more difficult to deal with than any enemy they have faced before. Although the Doomguards failed to cause any more harm to them after Dathrimar and others raised their alertness, if they were entangled by these demons for a long time, the large army of pursuers would undoubtedly approach quickly and sooner or later catch up with them. Tyrande stopped, clasping the sword in front of her chest with both hands, and began to gather the sacred power given to her by the moon goddess Elune. No matter what her fate is, she cannot sit idly by and watch these upper elves being implicated because of her. Moon goddess, I beg you, listen to my prayer, moon goddess, the priestess murmured piously. As she prayed, the light on the blade gradually spread upwards, illuminating her face, and the power continued to accumulate and strengthen. Tyrande carefully controlled this power, preparing to use it to conquer the demons in the sky. Suddenly, the silver halo of the sword burst into dazzling light, like daylight. Tomb of bright light. Tyrande chanted the magical spell loudly. Under the divine light of Elune, the demons in the sky suddenly found themselves tightly bound by an invisible force. The sacred light was like a chain, binding them tightly to the same place, unable to move. Tomb of bright light, 7-ring divine spell, traps and damages evil interdimensional creatures. Now! Tyrande shouted, let's go! There was no need for Tyrande to remind them. The moment she used Tomb of Bright Light, Dathrimar had already understood what she meant. He decisively seized this rare opportunity and led Tyrande and his companions to quickly escape from the pursuit of the Doomguard. As they gradually moved away from the demon's pursuit, Tyrande's confidence also increased sharply. She struggled to control her mount and followed closely behind the team. The light around her was like a bright strip of light that lasted for a long distance, illuminating the way forward for the fleeing team. Those demons who tried to get close to her felt strongly repulsed by the bright light and subconsciously wanted to run away. Whenever demons tried to break through this barrier of light, they would stagnate the moment they touched the light belt, as if immobilized. Tyrande could not help but be grateful to the moon goddess Elune in her heart. It was she who created this miracle that allowed them to escape safely from the devil's pursuit. Just as Tyrande was waving her sword and moving forward bravely, suddenly a pair of ghastly claws caught her off guard and violently tore her off the Nightsaber's back. The sudden attack made the priestess scream in terror, and her body was lifted up by the devil's claws and flown away from her companions. In midair, Tyrande's body was tense. She stared at the Doomguard in front of her, and the twisted and ferocious face came into view. The devil's eyes were almost tightly closed, and its breathing seemed uneven. This was obviously because the sacred light emanating from her body brought unbearable pain to it. At this critical moment, Tyrande slashed at the armored demon without hesitation. Maybe the devil dodged in time, or maybe she cut it crookedly, but her sword slipped past the devil's body, failing to cause a fatal blow. Despite this, the sudden attack still frightened the demon, and one of its hands unconsciously let go of Tyrande. Being high in the sky, Tyrande had no time to lower her head to check her distance from the ground. She could only silently pray in her heart that the moon goddess Elune could slow down her fall and give her a chance to escape. At this life-and-death moment, the priestess showed amazing courage and determination, and she once again launched a fierce attack on the Doomguards. This time, her sword tip accurately penetrated the demon's, blood spurted out immediately. The demon's body trembled violently, and the hand that was holding on to Tyrande finally let go. However, the violent tremor also caused the sword to fall from her hand. In a panic, Tyrande grabbed the body of the Doomguard, trying to climb up, hoping to use the demon's body to slow her fall. Unfortunately, the struggle of the Doomguard was too fierce, and she was unable to stabilize her position. She had to let go, and her body plummeted straight to the ground. In this thrilling moment, Tyrande closed her eyes tightly, silently praying to the moon goddess Elune. Yet, her thoughts drifted unconsciously to Ethan Kwaya. If she died like this, she knew he would feel guilty, and she didn't want him to bear such a psychological burden. It was not his fault that she was left to die. She knew that Ethan had done everything he could to rescue her. Compared to her compatriots, her personal destiny seemed so insignificant. How I wish I could see him again. Finally, Tyrande's body hit the ground. However, The impact was not as severe as she had imagined. Her body did not feel violent vibrations, nor did her bones break or her brain splatter on the ground. As her fingers touched the dust, she realized she was safe, or at least close to it. What puzzled her was how she landed unscathed. Only then did she realize she was being held tightly in someone else's arms, cradled like a princess. This close contact made her cheeks blush unconsciously. The owner of this embrace couldn't be more familiar to her. "Ethan," Tyrande blurted out, her voice full of surprise and excitement. The joy of being reunited in such desperate circumstances almost brought her to tears. Ethan frowned and leaned down to stare at the priestess in his arms, making sure she was okay. "You little fool, you always put yourself in danger." He gently put her on the ground and asked softly, "Are you okay? I came to pick you up as promised." Tyrande nodded, and the stone in her heart finally fell to the ground. She knew that with Ethan here, she would be safe. Then, Ethan raised his head and turned his eyes to the upper elves in front of him. "Thank you for escorting Tyrande all the way here," he said solemnly. "We will all remember your contribution. In the future, we will definitely give you the rewards you deserve, including those who unfortunately sacrificed their lives for this operation." Hearing Ethan's words, the upper elves all showed happy smiles. They knew that their efforts were not in vain. "Time is urgent, so let's just say goodbye," Ethan continued. "You should be fine going back on your own." "Of course, no problem," an upper elf replied. "We will be careful." "We'll just have to pretend to be victims then," another elf added. "Mr. Ethan has cleaned up the area around here. We have nothing to worry about," said another elf. After hearing this, Tyrande was surprised to see the situation nearby. Compared to the enemies they encountered along the way, the number of corpses of demons and moon guards near Ethan was even greater. He killed these all by himself, so the two sides parted ways. The upper-class elves should rush back to their mansions while the fog is still there, so they can fish in troubled waters and cover up their true whereabouts today. On the occasion of parting, Dathrema couldn't help but turn around, taking a deep look at Tyrande and Ethan, and said again, "Remember to take good care of my daughter." Then he was the last to leave them. Ethan and Tyrande joined hands and hurried out of the city. Their footsteps echoed in the empty streets, sounding particularly clear. Tyrande originally thought they would encounter many obstacles when leaving the city gate, but when they arrived, she was surprised to find that there was no one there, and the gate was wide open, as if to acquiesce in their departure. She didn't realize that at this moment, about a few hundred meters away behind her, a blindfolded, shirtless night elf quietly watched her back. After Tyrande had completely walked out of the city gate and Dis appeared from his sight, he silently wished her well in his heart. "Tyrande, may you have a safe journey." The night elf then turned to the moon guard beside him and commanded, "Follow me. Let's search over there. I saw the prisoners escape in that direction earlier, and we can't let them get away." The moon guards, who were supposed to be guarding the city gate, followed him one after another, hastily pursuing the fugitives. Chapter 743, Escape and the Pandaria Mission. As they completely stepped out of Asseline's boundary, Tyrande felt an unprecedented sense of relief, as if a boulder that had been weighing on her heart was instantly removed, allowing her to breathe freely. She felt like a bird breaking free from its cage and regaining its freedom. Finally, she couldn't contain her curiosity and asked Ethan, "How did you do it? How did you actually rescue me from that cell?" Ethan, also feeling relaxed after leaving Asseline's mystery lock, had some free time to chat with Tyrande. He smiled slightly and began to describe his plan in detail. He explained how he identified the Sun Chaser family and instigated their rebellion, making them powerful allies of the Resistance. He described how he contacted the Resistance, enabling them to launch a fierce offensive at the most critical moment, and how he coordinated with his rescuers. Their actions were closely synchronized. He also detailed how he used the advanced fire technique to place bombs in every corner of the noble district and detonate them at critical moments, creating unprecedented chaos. Fire Technique, a 6th-level druid spell that injects the power of the fire element into acorns and berries, turning them into grenades and bombs. Finally, Ethan did not forget to mention the contributions of Yeely and 530 Dan. We were able to leave the city gate unimpeded at the end of the operation, and Illidan also contributed significantly, he said with emotion. He pretended to pass on the devil's orders and lured away the city gate guards for us, buying us precious time to escape. Soon, Ethan and Tyrande passed through the dense forest near Asaline and stepped into the deep green. Alice had been waiting there for a long time. Tyrande had already heard the story of Elilith from Ethan, so when she saw the daughter of the Sunstrider family, her face naturally showed deep friendship. As soon as the two met, she walked up and took the initiative to hold Elilith's hand. "So, how should we go back?" Tyrande looked around and asked doubtfully. Ethan smiled mysteriously. "Of course, we'll go back in style." As soon as he finished speaking, Ethan's body began to change under the influence of the druid's spell. His body gradually twisted and merged, finally transforming into a giant chimera, Ethan's exclusive form, which combined the characteristics of 4 animals: lion, eagle, snake, and badger. At this time, the chimera was huge, with a body length of 3 to 4 meters excluding the tail, and wings spanning 8 meters wide. This size was enough to carry 2 people easily. "Come up," the chimera spoke softly, gently inviting the 2 ladies. "While the city is still searching for us, we will fly away directly." Alice looked at this huge creature with a trace of hesitation in her eyes. As a noble girl, her life experience was relatively simple, and she naturally felt some uneasiness and worry about unknown things. However, Tyrande climbed onto the chimera's back without hesitation and considerately left a place in front of her for Elilith, gesturing for her to come up with encouraging eyes. With Tyrande's encouragement, Elilith finally plucked up the courage and carefully climbed onto the chimera's back. After learning about Ethan's commitment to Elilith, Tyrande did not raise any objections. Instead, an idea came into her mind, to introduce this noble girl to Sister Elune and personally serve as her mentor. At this moment, she looked at Elilith as her future disciple. Tyrande said to Elilith in a gentle tone, "Come on, child, come to me. I will help you fasten your seatbelt to ensure that you will not fall from the height." Alice hesitated for a moment, but finally nodded and responded in a low voice, "Yeah, okay." At this moment, Ethan's voice interrupted them. "Please sit still. We are about to take off." As the chimera flapped its wings and flew high, Alice couldn't help shouting, "Ah! It's too fast!" This was her first time experiencing such a thrilling escape. Tyra, Dee experienced her first high-altitude flight with a mix of fear and excitement. She clung tightly to Elilith, trying to minimize the impact of the wind pressure. Frustrated, she patted the chimera's back and scolded loudly, "Why are you flying so fast? Can't you consider our feelings? And weren't you injured before? You've just recovered, and now you're acting like this. What if the injury recurs?" "Don't worry." Ethan slightly adjusted his flight direction in the air and said confidently, "The route I chose has been proven by practice when I came here. Although it cannot be said to be 100% safe, the chance of encountering demons is very low." Ethan had spent a long time on the way here, putting a lot of energy into studying a safe evacuation route. After repeated exploration and experiments, he finally chose the best flight path that could almost perfectly avoid the Burning Legion, ensuring the safety and smoothness of the evacuation. After leaving Zin Isilin, Ethan soared south. They crossed the border of the Dark Knight Empire and arrived at the northern region of Nazmir, belonging to Zandalar, by dusk the next day. Nazmir is a vast expanse of primeval rainforest, and the air here is filled with abundant water vapor. Unlike the comfortable, constant temperature environment inside the Dark Knight Empire, the climate in Nazmir is unbearably hot and humid. For Tyrande and Elilith, who had never stepped out of the Dark Knight Empire, this change in environment made them feel quite uncomfortable. Seeing the two of them squirming due to the sticky sweat all over their bodies, Ethan comforted them softly. "Be patient a little longer. We won't stay here for too long. As long as we pass this rainforest, our destination is ahead." After penetrating deep into the hinterland of Nazmir, Ethan gradually slowed down his flight speed. The sky above this mysterious rainforest was filled with all kinds of strange flying creatures, rarely seen in the Empire of Dark Knight. Elilith, who had never even left Asaline, was fascinated by the various strange species, her eyes lighting up with curiosity and excitement. Tyrande also looked at this land with surprise, finding every scene novel and shocking. As the number of comrades in the sky gradually increased and they moved farther away from the dangerous suburbs of Zin Isilin, Ethan gave up his original explosive flying method. He adjusted the Chimera's flight attitude, no longer blindly maintaining high speed, but adopting a more stable and controllable cruising flight mode. This extended the gliding time as much as possible and conserved energy. In this way, they could enjoy the rainforest scenery of Nazmir more calmly, while also ensuring the safety of long-term flights. When their journey brought them into the territory of Zandalar, Ethan's thoughts drifted into the distance. He recalled Chandris, who had followed the envoy to distant Pandaria, and felt an inexplicable worry in his heart. "I wonder if that girl's trip went smoothly?" Ethan murmured to himself. Based on the departure time, they should have entered Pandaria by now, right? At the foot of Kunlai Mountain in northern Pandaria, a team of dozens of night elves advanced resolutely towards the south. Although their numbers were few, each one displayed a strong will. Many elves in the team bore obvious scars, telling the story of the hardships and obstacles they had faced. Even Chandris's left arm was bandaged, with dark red blood slowly seeping out, indicating the heavy price she had paid in the previous battle. "Everyone, stop!" Oso Black Forest, the leader of the envoy, ordered with bloodshot eyes and a hoarse voice. "We will camp here today and set off again tomorrow." The armor on Oso's body still shimmers with a magical aura, and the attached automatic cleaning spell keeps it spotless. However, his originally smooth and neat hair, now exposed outside the helmet, has become messy. Thick dark circles under his eyes and a haggard appearance reveal his inner exhaustion. Following Oso's orders, the team members began to get busy, setting up tents and preparing dinner. "Ha! I can finally rest," the druid Lilindella sighed, leaning limply on Chandris, her strength obviously exhausted. Lilindella was one of the representatives of the druid sect participating in the mission. After spending time together, Chandris had established a deep friendship with this cheerful and informal druid. She rolled her eyes helplessly and carefully helped Lilindella sit on the ground. Lilindella's originally smooth cheek now bore 3 parallel scars. Although the scars were not large, they looked particularly striking. These 3 scars seemed to be marks left by the same enemy, making one wonder about the fierce battles they had encountered during their previous journeys. On the road to Pandaria, they inevitably passed through the territory of the trolls. The hatred between trolls and night elves had been deep for generations. Trolls believe in the Loa gods, who are sublimated from powerful beasts and share the same origin as the wild demigods. Because of this, the trolls, under the guidance of the Loa gods, would certainly not directly surrender to the Burning Legion, the enemy of the world. However, this didn't mean that the trolls wouldn't take advantage of the night elves' troubles. In the territory of Zuldazar, the envoys and the trolls engaged in a fierce battle. The physical strength of the combatants was severely exhausted in this contest, and it took a lot of effort for them to escape from the siege of the trolls. Chapter 744, Landmaster Businessman. Leaving the hot, humid, and lush green Zuldazar jungle, the special envoy finally entered the Kunlai Mountains in northern Pandaria. This continuous mountain range acts as a natural barrier, separating the trolls from the Pandaren. As they stepped into this area, the suffocating heat and humidity immediately dissipated, replaced by waves of dry and cool breeze. This breeze gently blew over the faces of the special envoy members, alleviating their fatigue and anxiety, refreshing their spirits, and reinvigorating them. The Kunlai Mountains are surrounded by towering peaks. The mountain roads here are winding, narrow, and rugged, as if nature itself had set a test for them. The members of the special envoy carefully traversed these winding trails, maintaining a high degree of vigilance at all times. Unfortunately, several members accidentally slipped and fell into the bottomless valleys due to temporary negligence and lack of concentration. Their shouts echoed in the valley, but were soon drowned in the silence, remaining in these mountains forever. After enduring untold hardships and traveling through mountains and rivers, Shandis and the others finally emerged from the 17 steep mountainous areas and arrived at a relatively flat and open area. Standing there and looking back at their journey, they couldn't help but be filled with emotion. Before setting off, Ethan had reminded them in detail about the living habits of the Pandaren. Therefore, before Oso led the team to set off, he had already begun to ask the members of the Special Envoy to gradually adjust their biological clocks to adapt to the time difference between the two different kingdoms. Contrary to the norm of night elves, they chose to travel during the day and rest at night, seeking safe camps to ensure the recovery of their physical strength and spirit. When they reached the foot of the mountain and prepared to set up camp, it was sunset. The afterglow of the setting sun bathed the mountains, making the entire Kunlai Mountains even more magnificent and mysterious. Members of the Special Envoy stopped to admire this rare beauty. The tranquility and beauty of this moment seemed to be the best comfort for their difficult journey. Perhaps because they were located in the high-altitude Kunlai Mountains, the night sky here was particularly magnificent, as if the entire universe was pouring onto this vast sky. The dazzling stars were like scattered diamonds, adding a touch of dreamy color to the dark night and providing enough clear illumination to make people intoxicated. Shandis happened to be on guard duty that night. She leaned quietly on the treetops, looking at the crescent moon in the sky with blurred eyes, and an inexplicable thought surged in her heart. She couldn't help but wonder, I wonder if Ethan has successfully rescued his mentor? It must be very difficult to sneak into the enemy's base camp in Zin Asalin. I hope he can complete his mission as smoothly as I did. Shasha! At that moment, a subtle rustling sound suddenly came from the surrounding sparse shrubs and plants, as if something was moving gently. Shandis immediately came back to her senses, clasped the bow and arrow in her hand, and pointed at the source of the sound vigilantly. Her eyes became sharp. The night elf's talent allowed her to easily see through the darkness and perceive everything hidden within it. However, Shandis did not speak out hastily. She knew very well that after just experiencing the battle with the trolls, the atmosphere in the camp was already too tense. If she raised an alarm, it would probably cause panic. So she chose another way to deal with this unexpected situation. She closed her eyes and began to pray silently in her heart. Merciful moon goddess, may you give me the light to dispel the darkness. As her prayers fell, the magic took effect immediately. Guiding light! A beam of soft moonlight suddenly fell from the sky, illuminating the yellow and green bushes. This beam of light was like a guiding beacon, revealing everything hidden in the darkness to Shandris. Wait a minute. Please don't attack. I mean no harm. A slightly nervous and sharp voice suddenly emerged from the bushes, breaking the tranquility of the night. As the voice fell silent, a short creature slowly walked out of the bushes, raising his hands to show his innocent intentions. Shandris noticed that his height barely reached her knees, a comparison that left her slightly stunned. The short creature wore a furry, warm hat that drooped, almost covering most of his face. Only a pair of sparkling eyes and a long black beard were visible. His outfit and appearance looked quite peculiar. Despite his small size, Shandris did not lower her guard. She kept her bow and arrow steadily aimed at the uninvited guest, her eyes filled with scrutiny and caution. "Who are you? Why were you hiding in the dark and observing us secretly?" she demanded. The strange creature seemed intimidated by Shandris's aura. He quickly pointed at the huge backpack behind him, which was several times his own body size, and hurriedly explained, "Don't get me wrong, I'm just a passing land trader. Because I've been on dangerous journeys all year round, I always keep a high level of caution and curiosity. I saw you camping here and couldn't help but hide and observe. I had no malicious intent." As he spoke, he deliberately opened the backpack, revealing a dazzling array of merchandise inside to prove his identity and purpose. Land spirit? Shandris raised her eyebrows slightly, recalling Ethan's instructions before he left. Ethan had described Pandaria's customs and various races in detail to her. In Pandaria, I personally traveled and got to know each race in depth. Each of these indigenous races has its own unique culture and customs, Ethan had said. Among them, the land elf race had left a deep impression on her. Ethan had described them as a race full of kindness and gentleness. They do not rely on plunder, but maintain life through honest labor and trade. You rarely see them doing anything out of the ordinary. They always do their job and stick to their principles. Ethan had also mentioned the relationship between the Land Elves and the Pandaren. They once fought together to resist the enslavement of the Mogu Empire, establishing a deep alliance with the Pandaren. This relationship is based not only on common interests, but also on mutual respect and trust. If you meet them in Kunlai Mountain, you may be able to ask a land spirit to guide you to the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, and you only need to pay an equivalent fee. Therefore, when Chandris saw this short land elf walking out of the bushes, she felt a bit more assured. She looked at the creature, whose eyes under the brim of his hat were full of a pleasing smile. Deciding to trust Ethan's intelligence, she slowly lowered her bow. She tried to make her voice sound soft and friendly. "Mr. Land Elf, we are envoys from the Dark Knight Empire. We have important matters to discuss with the King of the Pandaren, but we are not familiar with this land. Can you guide us and help us reach the Valley of Eternal Blossoms smoothly?" The land spirit's eyes lit up at her request. He nodded quickly and agreed. "Of course, I know this land well and can definitely find the fastest and safest route for you. But—" He paused, touching his beard with some embarrassment. "We need some compensation to maintain our lives. Are you willing to pay the corresponding fees?" "Of course we will pay accordingly," Chandris replied. Chapter 745, Jinxu Valley. When Ethan successfully rescued Tyrande from Iselin and set off back to the military camp, the envoy, burdened with heavy responsibilities, finally saw the dawn of hope after enduring numerous hardships. Chandris succeeded in persuading the gnome who had strayed into the night elf camp. This short guide was not only willing to lead them, but also agreed to guide them through numerous mountains to the mysterious Valley of Eternal Blossoms. All this required was a reasonable tour guide fee. Oso listened to Chandris's report and agreed to the land elf's request without hesitation. As the overlords of the ancient Kalimdor continent, the Night Elves were the wealthiest race of this era, and money was not a scarce resource for them. As Ethan had mentioned, the Land Elves were entirely different from some green dwarves. They adhered to the principle of honest business, and the tour guide fees they proposed were fair and reasonable, never excessive. With this guide, who was familiar with the terrain, leading the way, the rest of the journey became easy and smooth. They walked south along the winding mountain road, admiring Pandaria's unique natural scenery along the way. During this long journey, Oso also obtained a wealth of information about this mysterious continent from their humble guide. This information was undoubtedly a valuable asset for the envoys. It not only helped them better understand the customs and traditions of Pandaria, but also provided strong support for subsequent diplomatic activities. Oso was full of praise for Chandris's vision and communication skills. She not only successfully resolved the misunderstanding, but also brought unexpected gains to the entire team. From the mouth of the land spirit, the envoy learned the history of Pandaria and confirmed that most of Ethan's information was accurate. Nearly 2,000 years had passed since the various races of Pandaria broke free from the heavy yoke of the Mogu. During these long and tortuous years, Pandaria had experienced countless changes and vicissitudes. In this extended period, the races of Pandaria had endured much. The deep-rooted generational hatred between the Jinyu and the Hosens was like an insurmountable gap that separated them into two hostile sides. The migration of the Buffalo people was like an endless journey filled with countless hardships as they sought a new home. The invasion of the Zandalari was like a sudden storm sweeping across the entire Pandaria and creating an unprecedented crisis for all races. The Mogu people's counterattack once again enveloped this land in the haze of war. The four heavenly gods left wounds that were difficult to heal in their battle with the Mogu. Although their power remained strong, those scars became their eternal pain. The Mantid's crazy invasion every century was like an inescapable nightmare, causing all races in Pandaria to live in fear and uneasiness. Among the various tribes that escaped the enslavement of the Mogu, the hard-working and brave Pandaren gradually emerged. With their perseverance and courageous spirit, they became the new masters of Pandaria. They inherited the rich heritage of the Mogu Empire and used the prosperous Valley of Eternal Blossoms as their administrative center. From there, they continued to expand their territory outward. For thousands of years, the Pandarans' footprints spread across the territory within the majestic Great Wall, Panlong's spine. Whether it was the rugged Kunlai summit, the fertile Valley of the Four Winds, the mysterious Emerald Forest, or the dense Krasarang jungle, they left traces of their lives everywhere. They used their wisdom and sweat to jointly write the history and future of Pandaria. The four heavenly gods deeply appreciated the kind and brave nature of the Pandaran, so they guided this race without reservation, allowing it to embark on the road of rapid development. Under the blessing of the four heavenly gods, the Pandaran gradually achieved unprecedented prosperity and success. However, even behind such a prosperous scene, crises still loom. Although the Mogu tribe gradually declined after being overthrown from their rule, they still retain a strength that cannot be underestimated. Even a lean camel is bigger than a horse. To suppress the Mogu's counterattacks, the Pandaran had to deploy a significant number of standing troops throughout Pandaria and remain vigilant at all times. On the other hand, while inheriting the rich legacy of the Mogu Empire, the Pandaran also shoulder the great responsibility of being Mogu creations of the Titans. They need to guard the ancient gods in this secluded land, particularly the heart of Yisharj and what remains of it. This important task is like a double-edged sword, bringing both glory and dignity, but also increasing their burden. As a family of the ancient gods and remnants of the ancient man's empire, the Mantids have always coveted the hearts of the ancient gods. Every 100 years, they launch large-scale invasions from the Dread Wasteland and Mantis Gaokang against the Pandaran. To resist these ferocious offensives, the Pandaran had to invest a large number of troops. This century-old war not only tests the courage and wisdom of the Pandaran, but is also a severe challenge to their will and determination. Oso and others also learned an important piece of information from the land elf. The leader of the Pandaran is not called a king, but is honored as an emperor. The current emperor is named Xiao Hao. He is young and promising and is widely praised by the people. Under his leadership, the Pandaran have shown unprecedented unity and strength. When every generation of emperors ascends the throne, they devoutly ask the Jinyu people's prophets to predict the future destiny of the Pandaran people. I heard that Emperor Xiao Hao saw some terrible scenes in the future from the prophet's predictions when he ascended the throne. The land spirit spoke eloquently while leading the way, his words full of awe for the emperor. This short guide was very talkative and could answer almost every question raised by Chandris in detail. At the same time, he did not forget to sell his gadgets to the curious night elves around him. No one knows the content of that prediction except for a few people. But since Xiao Hao ascended the throne, he often traveled to the west with a close friend he met by chance in the Emerald Forest, the Monkey King, as if looking for something important, perhaps seeking some kind of relief. Monkey King? Chandris interjected curiously. Are you talking about the Hosen King? The land spirit nodded, and the beard on his face trembled. That's right. Although there is a deep feud between the Jinyu people and the Hosen, the Pandaran have established a deep friendship with both of them. Thanks to the mediation of the Pandaran, the Jinyu people and the Hosen were able to maintain a fragile peace and did not allow hatred to continue to spread. We're almost there. After crossing another hilltop, the land spirit raised his hand and pointed into the distance. The members of the Night Elf envoy looked in the direction of his finger and saw a majestic and open door standing in front of them, like an entrance to another world. Behind the gate, a golden wheat field came into view. The plump wheat ears shone brightly in the sun. Chandris opened her mouth in surprise and said in disbelief, "How is this possible? It's obviously not the harvest season. Why are the wheat fields?" The land elf smiled slightly, raised the brim of his hat, and explained proudly, "This is the greatest gift Pandaria has given us. All the food grown in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms can mature in just one day." He paused and then added, "This power beyond mortal understanding ensures that the people of all races living in Pandaria will never starve. But I guess you night elves should also have something similar, just not as exaggerated as ours, and can achieve 3 levels of growth in a short time. When Oso heard this, he just smiled non-committally. Of course, the night elf, nourished by the Well of Eternity, do not need to worry about food problems. With the almost unlimited supply of arcane energy from the Well of Eternity and more than half of the world's resources at their disposal, the night elves will not be greedy because of food issues. It is precisely because the land spirit understands this that Tuan Fu shows the magic of Jinxu Valley without reservation. On the way near the Eternal Blossom Valley, a rumbling sound suddenly came from the sky. Everyone looked up and saw a group of cloud serpent knights patrolling high above. These knights rode long, 3-clawed serpents like guardians of the sky, overlooking this mysterious continent. Their figures looked quite impressive in the sunlight. One of the Pandaren knights descended slowly on a dragon and hovered in front of the envoy. He wore gorgeous armor exclusive to the Cloud Serpent Knights, shining with golden light that complemented the Cloud Serpent Dragon's scales perfectly. The Pandaren knight held a spear, and his eyes were like torches. At first glance, he was clearly a high-level professional. The night elves were amazed and stared at the flying dragon, its scales shining like gems set in the sky. The knight smiled slightly and said in a loud voice, "Welcome to the land of Pandaria, outsiders. I am Ko Yang, a knight of the Cloud Dragon. May I ask what your purpose is here?" Oso took the initiative to step forward. They had experienced hardships and dangers along the way, and finally got in touch with the official forces of the Pandaren. The big stone in his heart finally fell to the ground, and a relieved smile appeared on his face. "Mr. Ko Yang, my name is Oso Black Forest, and I am the ambassador of the Night Elf Resistance." He stepped forward, paid a solemn courtesy to Ko Yang, and said, "I led the envoy here, hoping to meet your emperor. Your Majesty would like to thank you very much for conveying this information to us." "Ambassador?" Ko Yang's eyes flashed with surprise. Although he didn't understand what had happened in the Dark Knight Empire and what the so-called Resistance Army was about, he knew very well that the person who could bear this title was by no means ordinary. He calmly looked at the envoys in front of him. Every member looked extraordinary, especially Oso, the leader. The aura of a legendary powerhouse was so obvious. Ordinary organizations cannot afford such luxurious manpower, so what they say is probably true. Ko Yang secretly speculated in his heart about the purpose of this group of night elves. "Sorry, Mr. Ambassador." Ko Yang nodded slightly and apologized. "Your request is indeed beyond my scope of authority. I need to report the matter to my superiors first. Please understand." He thought for a moment and then continued. "If you don't mind, please ask your delegation to rest temporarily in Shifeng Village outside the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. We will report the visit of the Night Elf delegation as soon as possible. The group will wait patiently for now." Oso heard this and nodded, expressing his understanding. Although worries about the domestic war situation still lingered in his mind, he also understood that at this moment he could only comply. "Thank you, Mr. Ko Yang, for the arrangement. What we are going to discuss on this trip is important matters related to the Burning Legion. We hope to be summoned by the Emperor of your country as soon as possible." He then briefly described the horror of the Burning Legion. After hearing this, Ko Yang's expression suddenly became solemn, and he nodded seriously. "Mr. Ambassador, please rest assured that I will report the situation as soon as possible and try my best to facilitate a meeting between you and the Emperor." Chapter 7 and 46, Xiao Hao's Responsibilities. Deep in the Valley of Eternal Blossoms, the Mogashan Palace stands tall, simple, and solemn. Inside the palace, an old Pandaren man with a white beard and hair sat quietly in front of a jade-carved window. His eyes revealed the vicissitudes of time and profound wisdom. "Night elves?" After hearing the report from the Dragon Knights, a look of surprise flashed across the old man's face, and the jade cup in his hand trembled slightly. They were actually able to risk crossing the territory occupied by the Zandalari trolls to arrive in Pandaria? "Are you sure the ambassador mentioned the Burning Legion?" "Yes, Master Shi Yi. Yao Kai's, the leader of the Shanglong Knights, replied respectfully. "According to the detailed reports of the scouts, almost all the members of the Night Elves' envoy were injured. It is obvious that they have gone through many hardships. This old Pandaren man, known as Shi Yi, is the chief administrative officer under the current emperor. His official position is called Prime Minister in the Pandaren Empire. He stroked the long beard on his chin, pondered for a moment, and then spoke slowly. No matter what their intentions are, keeping distinguished guests out of the Valley of Eternal Blossoms is definitely not the way we Pandaren treat guests. Your Majesty is still in the Krasarang jungle seeking the wisdom and guidance of Red Crane Chi-Ji. So be it. Prime Minister Shi Yi turned to look at the first middle-aged Pandaren man wearing a gorgeous official uniform. Lord Du Yushan, I need you to use the authority of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs to arrange for these Night Elf envoys to move into the Seven-Star Palace as soon as possible. He paused for a moment before continuing. I will immediately send someone to inform His Majesty of the matter. Please make sure that our distinguished guests receive the hospitality they deserve. They must be extremely sincere to risk crossing the dangerous Zandalari Mountains to reach our Pandaria. Krasarang Jungle is located at the southernmost tip of the ancient continent of Kalimdor. In the jungle, several winding rivers are like many silver snakes running through it. The abundant water resources they bring are like a mother's milk, selflessly nourishing this lush land. In this jungle full of life, there is an ancient and solemn temple, Juhe Temple. It is not only a holy place for warrior monks, but also the earthly abode of one of the four gods of Pandaria, Chi-Ji. At this moment, in a broad and solemn square in Juhe Temple, dozens of temple-protecting monks wearing yellow robes stood in a mysterious and precise formation. These monks practiced unique skills, formation. The effect of the array is similar to that of a mage's spell. The only difference is that the former is driven by the monk's infuriating energy, while the latter requires the use of arcane energy. At this moment, the faces of every monk in the formation were filled with determination and piety. Each of them is a warrior who protects the gods, using their faith and strength to maintain the stability of the formation. In front of the main hall of the temple, the demigod Chi-Ji stood quietly. Its appearance is that of an elegant and splendid crane. Its fiery red feathers and tail feathers shone dazzlingly in the sun. Its snow-white body and wings were dotted with ink-like spots, and its whole body was covered with bright red magic patterns that seemed to be carefully drawn with a brush. These magic patterns were like flowing flames, both mysterious and full of power. Chi-Ji's eyes were fixed on the center of the formation, where a middle-aged Pandaren sat cross-legged, meditating with his eyes closed. The warm red light surrounding Chi-Ji's body seemed to be covered with a brilliant halo. It was formed by Chi-Ji's unique demigod power, which continuously injected into the formations set up by the monks in the square. A steady stream of energy flowed through the square. In the center, sitting cross-legged, was Xiaohao, the emperor of the Panda. Time had carved deep lines into his face. He wore a slim-fitting training uniform that, though simple, was clearly of fine workmanship. It hugged his figure, making him look both energetic and dignified. However, his brows were furrowed, as if he was grappling with some deep-seated confusion. Qi-Jing, the crane demigod, gently approached Xiaohao. She spoke to him in a soothing tone. Xiaohao, you don't have to be so nervous. Try to relax your mind and body. If you sincerely want to dispel the inner fog, you must first allow yourself to enter deep meditation. Hearing this, Xiaohao nodded. Yes, Qi-Jing, he replied. At that moment, a hosen with a sharp beak and monkey-like cheeks ran over in small steps, holding an exquisite mask in his hands. Xiaohao took the mask from the hosen and, without hesitation, placed it over his face. The mask bore a mysterious totem and looked extremely strange. After putting it on, Xiaohao began to adjust his breathing and slowly fell into the unique meditation of a monk. His mind gradually became ethereal, as if he was isolated from the world around him, leaving only him and his heart. Just as Xiaohao's consciousness sank deeper into his soul and his connection with the outside world weakened, the mysterious formation in the center of the square began to show subtle fluctuations. The originally stable red spiritual light started to flicker slightly, resonating with Xiaohao's meditation. Is it coming? Qi Jing's eyes flashed with a sharp light, and his voice was low and full of alertness. Before he finished speaking, his entire body suddenly erupted with dazzling light, like the rising sun, casting a golden hue over everything around him. At the same time, the temple-protecting monks, who had been sitting still, sprang into action. They abandoned their previous calmness and leaped up from the ground with strong postures and determined momentum. Their hands quickly formed seals, and the cyan true airflow was like a trickle, constantly being injected into the formation below them. In the center of the formation, the ominous black aura surrounding Xiaohao gradually gathered and condensed under the guidance of the formation. These breaths, which were originally like ethereal ghosts, gradually became solid, as if they were being given life. As the shape of this black figure became clearer, the monks protecting the temple finally saw the true face of this monster. Its appearance was strange and twisted, as if made up of countless desperate faces and contorted limbs. Since its appearance, this strange energy body had been continuously absorbing the desperate emotions from the frightened monks around it, using them as nourishment to strengthen itself. A centipede insect, dead but not stiff, Zhuhe Qijing muttered, staring at the monster with teeth and claws. He then casually introduced the origin of this creature. This is the Sha of Wandering, one of the 7 evil demons born from the remains of Yisharj, the 7-headed ancient god. It is a collection of despair in Pandaria and has been secretly shadowing this land. The leader of the monks at Zhuhe Temple, a middle-aged Pandaren warrior with strong skills and sharp eyes, looked at the scene with a mix of awe and concern. His face, usually calm, now showed signs of worry. "Lord Qiji, are we really just trapping it in the formation like this?" He hesitated for a moment before continuing. "What if it breaks free?" Qijing shook his head, interrupting the monk leader's worries. "Believe in Xiaohao. As a contemporary emperor who is respected by all the people of Pandaria, the courage and wisdom he possesses are unimaginable. If he can overcome the despair in his heart, the power of the evil spirit will be diminished." Ouch! At this moment, after absorbing enough despair, Wan Jisha, who was trapped in the center of the formation, finally spoke, letting out a deafening roar. "Stupid mortals, do you think this mere formation can seal me?" Wan Jisha's voice was cold and taunting. "Faced with a fate you cannot escape, with a tough L, you just struggle desperately. Humph, it's so pitiful and sad." Every word of Wan Jisha carried the magic power of darkness, which quietly invaded the hearts of every monk present. Almost simultaneously, the most painful and unacceptable memories of their lives surfaced in their minds. These shadows, buried deep within their hearts, were now ruthlessly uncovered, causing their hearts to be hit hard once again. Despair spread like a plague in Zhuhe Temple, and the black aura crazily poured into Wan Jisha's body like dark elves lured out by the evil of desolation. Wan Jisha smiled wildly, enjoying this feast of despair. "Everyone, hold on. Hold your breath and concentrate. Try to recall those good times, and don't let negative emotions completely devour your souls." Qiji shouted loudly, reminding the monks present. It should be noted that in terms of mental steadfastness, monks are almost the best among all professions. Even priests and paladins find it difficult to compare with monks in this aspect. The reason lies precisely in the mission of the monks. The specialty of Pandaria, the Sha, is most fond of psychic attacks. If their spiritual cultivation was even close, they would have died in the fight against evil spirits. But ordinary monks alone can only achieve a stalemate with the evil demon at best. It is far from enough to rely on them to fight against this remnant of the ancient god. As a result, Qiji, as the eye of the formation, increased the output of power, and a warm and moist energy slowly gushed out from under the ground within the formation. This power was like sweet spring water, nourishing the dry hearts of the monks, allowing them to find themselves again in the abyss of despair. However, Xiaohao at the center of the formation was completely unaware of everything happening outside. He was immersed in his own meditation world, as if isolated from the outside world. The Monkey King anxiously stood beside his friend, scratching his head and ears, but he was helpless. This brave and skilled Hosen King was fearless on the battlefield, but in the face of this spiritual confrontation, he felt powerless. He could only guard Xiaohao silently, hoping that he would wake up from his meditation as soon as possible. Chapter 747, Formal Negotiation. After being led to reside in the Palace of Seven Stars in the Vale of Eternal Blossoms, the Night Elves' envoy was finally able to officially settle down. These guests, who had traveled from afar, were immersed in a rare sense of peace after their long journey. The exhausted Chandris was finally able to sleep without any precautions, and her whole body gradually regained its vitality in this deep sleep. The fatigue accumulated during the previous journey slowly dissipated with her breathing. Upon waking, Chandris happily ventured out to see the scenery. The land of Eternal Blossom Valley is protected by magical power, maintaining the beauty of blooming flowers at all times. Here, the 4 seasons are like spring, and the flowers are always in bloom, as if time has stopped. The scenery outside the Seven Stars Hall is picturesque, with endless golden rice fields sparkling in the sunlight. Such beautiful scenery made Chandris and her companions relax their tense nerves as they explored, feeling as if they were in a fairyland on Earth. "This land is so amazing," Irelindella remarked, leaning lightly on the exquisite railings on the 2nd floor of the Seven Stars Palace, her eyes shining with deep amazement. "Look at that rice field. It can actually ripen in one day. This is simply a miraculous work of nature. Even our Well of Eternity cannot match such a miracle, right?" Hearing this, Chandra shook her head slightly, a hint of contemplation in her eyes. Perhaps the Well of Eternity also has such potential, but the upper elves who control it prefer to regard it as an endless stream of energy, a treasure trove of arcane energy zones. She sighed softly and continued, "Under the nourishment of the powerful energy of the Well of Eternity and the protection of the everlasting warm magic circle in the Dark Knight Empire, our people have never worried about food. Because of this, the upper elves are naturally unwilling to easily open up the power of the Well of Eternity to benefit more people." "Ha!" Irelindella snorted in dissatisfaction, a contemptuous smile on her lips. "It's so selfish. The Well of Eternity is obviously the common wealth of all Night Elves. Why can only the upper elves monopolize its energy? This is simply another level of betrayal." Chandris did not comment on Irelindella's complaints, as this issue is not just a matter of talk. It involves the long-standing conflict between the upper elves and the common people. In Chandris's view, this is not just a matter of resource allocation, but also about deep-seated differences in the Night Elves' social structure and values. The lower Night Elves cherish the desire for a better life. They long to make full use of the endless energy of the Well of Eternity and let its blessings spread like spring rain throughout the entire Dark Knight Empire. At the same time, the Druids, led by Cessanelius, held a more cautious attitude. They believe that the power of the Well of Eternity is powerful and tempting, like Pandora's box, which may cause endless disasters once opened. Therefore, they advocate maintaining self-discipline and restraint in the face of this powerful temptation, using its power prudently only within necessary limits. Cenarius's vision was to avoid oversquandering Azeroth's most dazzling treasure, lest it attract enemies who would covet it. However, the wheel of history did not move according to Cenarius's expectations. Although he tried his best to shout and warn, in the end, his efforts came to nothing. Relying on their in-depth research and exploration of the Well of Eternity, the Highborn took the risk and actively summoned the demons of the Burning Legion from the Twisting Nether. This not only pushed the Night Elves into the abyss of eternal destruction, but also plunged the entire continent of Azeroth into an unprecedented crisis. That's why this war is happening now. In short, this kind of leisure lasted for several days. The members of the envoy waited quietly in the Seven Stars Palace, enjoying the tranquility and beauty of the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. Star Palace, looking forward to further replies from the Pandaren. Little girls like Chandris can still enjoy the scenery of the Vale of Eternal Blossoms for a little while, but Special Envoy Otho Blackforest doesn't have that much free time. With a heavy responsibility, he has been trying to communicate with the Pandaren. His goal is very clear. He hopes that the Pandaren can open up the use of the magic network in the Valley of Eternal Blossoms in order to establish contact with the main force of the Resistance Army far outside Isolin. On the fourth day, after the mission arrived in the Valley of Eternal Blossoms, Otho came to communicate with the Pandaren officials as usual. Suddenly, an inexplicable power surged through the air. All creatures in Pandaria felt their hearts beating faster, and an ominous aura emanated from the south of the Vale of Eternal Blossoms. This presence was like a shadow in the dark night, making people shudder. Plop! Plop! Chandris held her violently beating heart with her hand and looked up at the distant sky in surprise. She saw wisps of black lines rising from the far south, like devil's tentacles, dancing wantonly in the sky. What is this? The members of the Special Envoy were frightened by this sudden turn of events. They looked at each other, at a loss. However, at this moment, a kind-hearted old panda man walked up the stairs slowly with a cane. "Distinguished guests, please don't worry," the old panda man said with a smile. "This situation has happened before, and it should be back to normal soon." His voice was calm and powerful, as if it had a kind of magical power, making the panic go away. The crowd gradually became quiet. "Everyone, please be patient and listen to me." Otho also stood up, his eyes sweeping over everyone's faces, and finally fell on the panda standing next to him. "This is the chief consul of the Pandaren Empire, our beloved Prime Minister Shi Yi. Dear friends who have come from afar, I'm really sorry. His Majesty Xiaohao is currently presiding over the ritual of sealing the evil spirits in the Zhuhe Temple in the south." Shi Yi smiled, clasping his hands, and spoke in a unique way, of course, in the night elf's manner, greeting Chandris and others with a polite nod. "Please rest assured, once the ceremony is successful, I will immediately notify His Majesty, and he will rush back as soon as possible. In the meantime, please wait a moment and be patient." His words calmed the hearts of the members of the mission a little. Compared to the outsiders who made a fuss, the locals were much calmer. These panda people seemed to have become accustomed to such sudden changes. Under the guidance of Prime Minister Shi Yi and other senior officials, they did not panic excessively about this situation. The residents of the Valley of Eternal Blossoms still maintained their unique calmness and continued to live their lives. 3 days later, the palpitating and ominous feeling finally dissipated with a thunderous roar coming from the far south. This voice was full of unwillingness and anger, but to both the mission and the locals, it was like the sound of nature, announcing the end of the crisis. On this day, Otho, as the ambassador, was finally able to meet with Xiaohao, the contemporary emperor of the Pandaren Empire. This emperor exuded an indescribable temperament, and his face was both relaxed and deeply tired. This complicated expression puzzled Otho. "Dignified guests who have come from afar, welcome to the land of Pandaria." Facing the envoy in front of him, Emperor Xiaohao looked very cordial and said with a smile, "I am the Emperor of the Pandaren, Xiaohao." Otho bowed and expressed his respect for the Emperor. After a brief exchange of greetings, he brought the topic to the point. "Your Majesty Xiaohao, the Burning Legion is the common enemy of all living things in Azeroth. They use the energy supply portal of the Well of Eternity to continuously attack from the Twisted Nether. Our world is sending reinforcements. The situation is extremely unfavorable to us, and the Night Elf resistance may not be able to sustain it for long." Having said this, Oso paused and looked firmly at Emperor Xiaohao. "Therefore, on behalf of the resistance, I implore your Majesty to prioritize the safety of Azeroth and send reinforcements to fight alongside us. Only by destroying the Well of Eternity can we completely cut off the Burning Legion's reinforcements." "Destroy the Well of Eternity? Are you really sure you want to do this?" Xiaohao's eyes flashed with obvious surprise, finding the proposal unbelievable. As far as we know, the Well of Eternity is indeed the foundation of the Night Elves' development and growth. Its importance is self-evident. Without the Well of Eternity— "Yes, we are very sure," Oso nodded firmly, his eyes revealing a complex mix of determination and helplessness. "But now, it has begun to be polluted by evil energy, which poses a huge threat to all of us." A bitter smile appeared on Oso's face. "According to the news from Zin Aslan and the reliable intelligence we have, the leader of the Burning Legion is a fallen titan named Sargeras. The current portal cannot support his passage, but once this demon enters our world, it will be an unimaginable disaster. We must take action to destroy the Well of Eternity and cut off the source of energy for the Burning Legion. This so-called news from Zin Asselin and reliable information at hand actually came from Ethan. The Night Elves know almost nothing about the origin of Azeroth and the Titans. In this era, only Ethan, the time traveler in Azeroth, understands everything. Even Luo Ning and the others from the future don't know as much as Ethan. Since Ethan planned to send people to the Pandaren for help, he was certainly prepared. He knew very well what kind of information could impress the Pandaren. Titan? Sure enough, when he heard this word, Xiaohao exclaimed immediately, his face full of shock and confusion. I saw from the prophecy of the Jinyu people that the devil would use evil energy to destroy Azeroth, but I never thought that the Burning Legion was actually related to the death of the Titans. Chapter 748, Pandaren Reinforcements. Of course, Xiaohao would be sensitive to the word Titan. The Mogu tribe, which once enslaved the Pandaren, were originally Titan creations with roots in Hongmiaozheng. Although they have lost much precious information over the long years, they always remembered their noble responsibilities as Titan creations. After countless springs and autumns, in order to resist the Mantids, who were the minions of the ancient gods, the Mogu tribe spared no effort to drive many races such as Pandaren, Hosen, Buffalo people, and Jinyu people to work day and night to build a towering great wall, Panlongji. This great wall has witnessed the glory of the Mogu tribe and also their brutal rule. However, the rule of the Mogu tribe was eventually overthrown due to the joint resistance of many tribes because of its cruelty. During this transformation, the Pandaren, as the main inheritors of the Mogu legacy, absorbed a large amount of knowledge about the Titans and their creations, understanding the deep connection between Azeroth and the Titans. Xiaohao was surprised when he heard Oso's statement. He couldn't help but stand up from the throne and stare at the Night Elf ambassador. Ambassador Oso Black Forest, are you sure that Sargeras is a Titan? Seeing Xiaohao's reaction, Oso felt a glimmer of hope, knowing that things might turn around. He immediately struck while the iron was hot and said firmly, "It's absolutely true, Your Majesty. Although Sargeras is called the Fallen Titan, there is no doubt about his identity as a Titan. I can assure you of this." Really? Xiaohao muttered to himself, frowning, and sat back on the throne. He took a deep breath, as if to calm the turbulence in his heart. Indeed, if an obviously hostile fallen Titan is allowed to enter Azeroth, then everyone living in this world will probably face annihilation. But, having said this, he hesitated, with complicated emotions flashing in his eyes. As the Emperor of the Pandaren, he not only had to consider the safety of the entire Azeroth, but also ensure that his people were safe and sound. This heavy sense of responsibility made him feel stressed when making every decision. Over the years, he had traveled far and wide to gain an in-depth understanding of the culture and power of various races, precisely to minimize the losses of the Pandaren when the Burning Legion invades. He knew that this crisis was not only related to the Pandaren, but also to the future of Azeroth as a whole. In order to find a solution, Xiaohao decided to go to the Qinglong Temple in the Emerald Forest and seek advice from the wisest Qinglong Yulong among the four gods. He believed that only with the help of the power of the gods could he find a way to save Azeroth. In Qinglong Temple, Yulong gave Xiaohao some tips. He told Xiaohao to release the burden on his body, clarify his heart, and become one with the land of Pandaria. Only in this way could he truly feel the power of the earth and use this power to fight against the coming disaster. However, even Yulong herself didn't know exactly how to operate it. After all, she was just a demigod, not a real god. All she could do was give Xiaohao some unclear guidance based on the vague future she had inadvertently observed. During his subsequent travels, Xiaohao accidentally met a like-minded friend, the famous Monkey King of the Hosen clan. This Monkey King was not only witty and powerful, but also proficient in all kinds of wonderful magic. He cleverly made a magic mask. With the help of this mask, Xiaohao was able to enter a deep state of meditation. In this state, he bravely faced the doubts in his heart and finally forced the hidden doubts out of his body, forming the first evil spirit, the evil spirit of doubt. Qinglong Yulong and Monkey King had been by Xiaohao's side, giving him encouragement and support. With their help, Xiaohao went through untold hardships and finally defeated the powerful evil spirit of doubt. The evil of doubt was sealed deep in the Qinglong Temple, guarded by Yulan Di himself, to ensure it would never reappear in the world. After sealing the evil of doubt and the evil of Wan, Xiao Hao gradually realized the way to save his people. He understood that to relieve himself and the entire people of Pandaria of their burden, he must seal the 7 evil spirits formed by Yasharj's remaining aura. However, at this critical moment, the Night Elves' ambassador arrived in Pandaria with shocking news. The Burning Legion was plotting to invade Zerath. Xiao Hao found himself in a dilemma. On one hand, he needed to use the power of the 4 heavenly gods to seal the 7 evils, and even planned to form an elite force to assist him. On the other hand, he could not sit back and watch the Night Elves fight alone. He had to send troops to support them as soon as possible to prevent the invasion of the Burning Legion. Xiao Hao knew that if Sargeras successfully entered Azeroth, the entire world would fall into endless darkness. He faced a difficult decision. Should he hold on to Pandaria or send troops to aid the Night Elves? Prime Minister Shi Yi, keenly aware of Xiao Hao's hesitation and troubles, carefully considered his words and slowly suggested, "Your Majesty, the current situation is difficult. We may need to take some unusual measures. Although dividing troops has always been a taboo for military strategists, in this critical situation, we may only be able to move dangerously to break the situation." Xiao Hao raised his head and looked at the old prime minister who had been assisting him conscientiously for many years, with a thoughtful look on his face. "Shi Yi, you mean we should divide our forces? Send some troops to support the Night Elves?" "That's right, Your Majesty," Shi Yi replied, bowing with a steady and powerful voice. "As far as I know, there are still decades before the Mantids' expected invasion, and starting more than 10 years ago, most of the Mogu tribe has been completely petrified and entered a state of slumber. Therefore, we should now be able to mobilize a lot of troops from across the country as backup." He continued, "The action of sealing the demon is not something that ordinary people can participate in. I think that in addition to leaving the 4 heavenly gods and a small number of elite forces to be responsible for the seal, we can send the remaining main force to the frontline battlefield to fight side by side with the Night Elves. In this way, we may be able to take care of both aspects, not only maintaining the seal on the demons, but also effectively supporting the Night Elves. What does Your Majesty think of this?" Under the thoughtful advice of Prime Minister Shi Yi, Xiao Hao finally made up his mind and adopted his idea. Since he still shouldered the important task of sealing the remaining 5 evil spirits, Xiao Hao could not withdraw himself from Pandaria. Therefore, he entrusted the important task of leading the army to Guan Zhengye, a well-respected marshal in the Pandaren Empire. Marshal Guan Zhengye, known for his bravery and proficiency in battle, was the best candidate to lead the army on an expedition. At the same time, to ensure that the next operation to seal the evil demon would go more smoothly, Xiao Hao carefully selected the bravest and most skilled warriors from various armies to form an elite force called the Shadow Pan. This force would become a trump card in his hand, providing a strong guarantee for the actions of sealing the demon. Seeing that everything was arranged properly, Xiao Hao's heart felt a little lighter. Oso, who had successfully completed his mission to seek help, also felt the burden on his shoulders had been reduced significantly. However, the next wait was not easy. It would take a certain amount of time to integrate the main forces across the country, and during this period, Oso obtained Emperor Xiao Hao's permission and contacted the main resistance forces on the front line through Pandaria's magic network, hoping to learn about the latest battle conditions. However, when the news arrived, Oso was far from pleased. The Burning Legion seemed to have been provoked by some unknown stimulus. It abandoned its previous calm defensive posture and launched an unprecedented, frenzied attack on the resistance. Led by the talented commander Jared, the resistance forces managed to withstand the Burning Legion's fierce offensive for the time being. However, in the face of the enemy's continuous reinforcements and relentless assaults, countless brave soldiers sacrificed their lives on the battlefield every day. The question of how long the resistance army can hold on weighs heavily on everyone's mind, and no one dares to give an answer easily. Chapter 749. Ethan returns. When Ethan drove Tyrande and Elise back to the frontline military camp after a tortuous detour, the sight before them was shocking. The camp was filled with injured soldiers, and the air was thick with the sound of wailing. Ethan and Tyrande's expressions grew solemn. The cruelty of this war had exceeded their imagination. But the most shocked among them was Elise. The little girl stared blankly at everything around her and murmured to herself, "Is this the real battlefield? The fairy tale-like wars described in those novels are indeed all lies." Because the battle on the front line was too fierce, when Ethan landed at the military camp with Tyrande, only a few lightly wounded soldiers were guarding the gate, questioning their visitors in tired voices. However, Ethan was famous among the Druids, and his deeds had become legendary in the war. Besides Malfurion, he was the second Druid to shine in the conflict. Therefore, many Druids accompanying the army had heard of his name, and some had even fought alongside him, so he easily proved his identity. After getting the approval of the camp guards, they were able to enter the main camp smoothly. Ethan led a serious-looking Tyrande and a silent Elise straight to the commander's tent. They opened the tent flap and entered. A few guards stood at the door with solemn expressions. Jared was the only one sitting in the camp, frowning as he stared at the strategic map on the table, looking for an opportunity to break through the predicament. None of the officers Ethan had met before were in the camp at the moment. They must have gone to their respective battlefields. "Huh? Someone is coming?" Jared woke from his reverie and turned his gaze from the map to the door. The silence of the camp was broken by the sudden sound of footsteps, which also caught his attention. He raised his head, and his eyes met the figures who had just entered. It was Ethan and Tyrande, and a trace of surprise flashed in his eyes. "Ethan!" Jared's tone was filled with unconcealable joy. "Judging by the happy look on your face, the mission must have been successfully completed, right?" Then, he turned to Tyrande, placed his hand on his chest, and bowed deeply. "Priestess Whisperwind, it's great to have you back. Lord Stormrage." His words were suddenly interrupted as his eyes noticed the clasped hands of Ethan and Tyrande. He suddenly understood and smiled slightly, subtly changing the topic. "We can finally breathe a sigh of relief." Jared couldn't help but shake his head and sigh inwardly. It seemed that the competition between the Stormrage brothers had unexpectedly ended in a lose-lose situation. The winner was neither Illidan nor Malfurion, but this brave warrior, Ethan. Who could have predicted such an ending? At that time, Jared thought that Tyrande would eventually end up with one of the Stormrage brothers. In fact, even Tyrande and the Stormrage brothers thought so. They had known each other for a long time, even before the war, when they were all energetic young people. It seemed certain that Tyrande and one of the Stormrage brothers would spend the rest of their lives together. But fate is always good at playing tricks on people. The war changed everything, including the destiny of people's hearts and emotions. Now, seeing Ethan and Tyrande standing side by side, he felt a mix of emotion and blessing in his heart. Tyrande's character was like fire. She cut off Jared's polite words without hesitation and asked about her friends, her tone full of urgency. "Maiev and Malfurion, what's going on with them? Are they hurt?" Jared was stunned for a moment, then showed a wry smile and replied, "Don't worry, they are all safe and sound. But Malfurion..." Tyrande thought for a moment, then waved her hand. "No, let's forget it," she sighed, a trace of worry flashing in her eyes. Shaking her head, she said, "I'd better go see High Priest Dejana first. Before I was captured, she was overstretched in order to cover the safe retreat of the sisters. She couldn't wake up. How is she doing now?" Jared nodded slightly and replied, "The High Priest woke up more than half a month ago, but her physical condition is still relatively weak. It is indeed a good choice for you to visit her." After hearing this, Tyrande said decisively, "Then I will say goodbye. If there is a time when you need me to fight, please come directly to the camp of the Sisters of Elune to find me." Tyrande had just finished explaining the matter and was about to turn around and leave, but Ethan grabbed her slender wrist and gently pulled her back. She looked back, her eyes filled with doubt, wanting to know what he wanted. Ethan smiled, said nothing, and just pointed to his cheek. Tyrande instantly understood what he meant, and a blush quickly appeared on her face, contrasting sharply with her earlier decisive demeanor. She looked around and found that everyone in the tent was watching them, and she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She lowered her head shyly and whispered, "Really? Do you really want to do this here? Everyone is looking at us." Ethan's eyes were firm as he nodded. Okay, I really can't defeat you." Tyrande sighed helplessly, as if indulging a wayward younger brother. She suppressed her shyness, slowly stood on her tiptoes, and pressed a gentle kiss on Ethan's cheek. Then, like a frightened deer, she trotted away from the tent, leaving behind only a faint scent and meaningful looks from everyone. Gerard and the guards in the tent felt like wild dogs passing by, unexpectedly stuffed with dog food, which made them feel both embarrassed and envious. This hero's rescue of the beauty undoubtedly left a deep impression on Tyrande, quickly bringing her and Ethan's relationship closer. The already ambiguous relationship rapidly heated up. On the way back, even with the lively and cute little light bulb like Alice, it couldn't stop a man and a woman from talking to each other and expressing their care. Not to mention a gentle kiss on the cheek, they had explored more extreme and intimate interactions. Their relationship had developed to the level of intimacy that was only one step away. This time, Ethan's actions in the military camp were more like declaring his sovereignty over Tyrande in a special way. Everyone, including Jared, chose to watch these heartwarming scenes silently, as if all this had nothing to do with them. However, the hearts of many guards were already turned upside down. They witnessed the gossip among the high-level rebels and felt unprecedented stimulation and excitement. This kind of insider knowledge that is usually difficult to access had undoubtedly added a lot of talk and fun to their lives. After Tyrande left, Jared turned his doubtful eyes to Ethan and asked, "Ethan, this beautiful young lady is—" Ethan came back from his thoughts and looked around at the surrounding guards. Jared immediately understood and waved his hand, signaling everyone to step aside, leaving them a private space. When there were only 3 of them left in the tent, Ethan revealed, "Her name is Elith. She is an upper elf and belongs to the Sunstrider family. You should know something about this family. They have now become our allies. It was thanks to their help that I was able to successfully rescue Tyrande from danger." Jared nodded after hearing this. He had already learned some rumors from Malfurion about the Sunstrider family's surrender to the Resistance. This was also the key to the Resistance's success. The army's ability to launch a large-scale attack on Iceland was no small feat. Behind every action lay meticulous planning and support from all parties involved. As the commander-in-chief of the Resistance, Gerard would naturally not initiate a surprise attack on Issa 897 Lin without thorough knowledge and preparation. Seeing the look of understanding in Jared's eyes, Ethan shrugged and said, "I will explain the details to you later. For now, please find a magister to send Alalace to Black Crow Castle. She was there to help the Sunchaser family move." "No, please, wait." Alalace, who had been silent until now, suddenly raised her head, her eyes flashing with determination. "Can you allow me to stay in the military camp and observe for a while? I promise not to interfere with any of your actions. I just want to witness the real battlefield with my own eyes." Jared was stunned. He turned to look at Alalace, a trace of embarrassment flashing in his eyes. He knew that as an upper elf from Zin Ashari, Alalace's identity within the Resistance was indeed sensitive. Even though she was from the Sunchaser family, he couldn't completely trust her. The secrets and strategic arrangements in the room could not be compromised. Gerard looked at Ethan hesitantly, as if seeking his opinion. Ethan frowned slightly, and after a moment of thought, asked in a deep voice, "Alalace, have you truly made your decision? The real battlefield is far more cruel than what you read in those fantasy novels. There are no fairy tales there. There is no poetic duel scene like in The Night, only blood and tragedy, a battle of life and death." "I'm sure." Alalace's eyes were firm. She bit her lower lip tightly and clenched her fists, as if trying to channel all her determination and strength into them. "I'm sure," she repeated decisively. "The devil has cruelly taken the lives of so many compatriots. I must see with my own eyes what kind of enemy my parents and brother will face." As she spoke, She raised her head and looked directly at Ethan, a firm light in her clear eyes. Since I have to fight these demons sooner or later, I want to take this opportunity to observe them up close and understand them. This way, I can adapt faster and be better prepared. I may even be able to help my parents. Chapter 750, The High Priest's Instructions. Ethan was surprised by Elise's determination. He could not imagine that this upper elf girl, who had lived a carefree aristocratic life not long ago, could mature so quickly and show such a firm will when faced with the challenge of being separated from her family. Hey, Ethan sighed helplessly. I don't object to you staying in the military camp, and I am willing to vouch for you, but I really hope you can think it through again. He reached out his hand and gently rubbed Elise's stubborn hair, his eyes filled with the care of an elder. Believe me, he said earnestly, the war with the Burning Legion will not last long. Maybe everything will be settled before you actually step onto the battlefield. Seeing that Elise's lips were slightly parted, as if she wanted to give an answer immediately, Ethan gently put his finger in front of her lips to signal her to calm down. Don't rush to give an answer. Impulsive decisions are often regrettable. I will give you half a month to think it over, to experience the cruelty of the battlefield for yourself, and to understand the enemies you may face in the future. I hope that after half a month, you can give me a clear answer after thinking calmly. After saying that, he gently patted Elise's slightly unwilling head, with a gentle smile on his face. If you still insist on your original intention at that time, he promised, as long as you are willing, I can ask Tehran to personally guide you and help you grow. This can also be regarded as a little bit of feedback for our contribution to the Sunstrider family. Elise didn't like Ethan's comforting gestures, treating her like a child. She quickly and decisively slapped Ethan's hand away with a hint of displeasure on her face. Please don't do this to me. I have grown up, she pouted and said. Besides, there is no need to trouble Miss Tehran. My parents have said that the Sunchaser family voluntarily bears such risks, and everything we do is for the future of the Night Elves. After hearing this, Ethan couldn't help laughing. He admired Elise's determination and maturity, so he said gently, Of course, I understand your sacrifice and dedication, but this matter is not something you can decide alone. I have my own discretion. After saying that, he turned to look at Jared, who was standing aside. Spreading his hands, he said in a relaxed and sincere manner, So, Jared, what do you think? I am willing to vouch for Elise. Can we let her stay in our military camp temporarily? Jared looked at Ethan's serious eyes, then glanced at Elise standing aside. He shook his head helplessly and said with a wry smile, You have already made up your mind. What else can I say? However, I hope you can tell me more about Miss Sunchaser later. No problem. Neltharion? Ethan suddenly mentioned this name after listening to Jared's sharing of Aseline's internal intelligence. Jared nodded and began to explain Malfurion's whereabouts. The Archdruid did not appear on the frontal battlefield because he received a signal for help from High Mountain. He and the eagle demigod Onha quickly headed there together. He paused and continued. When they arrived at High Mountain, the Black Dragon King Neltharion was wreaking havoc near his lair. The scene was simply thrilling. Ethan asked doubtfully, Neltharion has committed such a big crime before. How can he dare to return to his lair so arrogantly? Isn't he afraid of the siege of the dragon army? This is indeed difficult to understand, but it is the truth. Jared sighed helplessly. You experienced it yourself at the beginning. The 4 guardian dragons absorbed too much power from the dragon soul. Now they are all in a state of weakness, especially the blue dragon king Malagos. He was seriously injured before, and because the injury was caused by the dragon soul, it has not yet recovered. He glanced at Ethan and continued. Not to mention, even if the 4 guardian dragons join forces in a healthy state, it will be difficult to defeat Neltharion. Nesario held the artifact in his hand, which might explain his unwavering confidence, Jared concluded. In short, to counter Neltharion's rampant destruction, the Tauren have had to temporarily withdraw some of their troops. This will significantly weaken our forces on the front lines, which is why the Archdruid volunteered to go to High Mountain. We don't know if Malfurion can find a way to lure the Mad Dragon away. Otherwise, the consequences will be disastrous. That's it, Ethan whispered to himself, a glimmer of understanding flashing in his eyes. Based on the current events and the information he had gathered, the reason for Neltharion's madness was becoming clearer in his mind. He pondered for a moment before speaking slowly. The 4 guardian dragons have fallen into weakness due to their diminished power, while Neltharion suffers from the after-effects of excessive use of the dragon soul. These 2 situations counterbalance each other, creating a temporary calm between the 2 sides, who were originally at odds. This calm is only temporary, he continued to think. Once Neltharion resolves his after-effects, or the power of the 4 guardian dragons is restored, this balance will be broken. As long as the dragon soul remains in Neltharion's hands, the aspect dragons will undoubtedly suffer. We must be prepared to prevent this from happening. While Ethan was contemplating how to deal with the threat of Deathwing, Tyrande was sitting by High Priest Dejana's bed, silently casting healing spells. The staff in the priestess's hand waved gently, releasing a soft light. She kept calling for the blessing of the moon god in her heart, trying to bring a glimmer of life to the high priest. Due to the urgent war situation, Maiev, the leader of the battle priests, had led the elite members of the sisterhood to the front lines to fight the demons. In the camp, only non-combatants remained, staying at their posts to treat the wounded who had been evacuated to the rear. High Priest Dejana's face was pale as she lay on the bed. She looked at Tyrande's nervous and focused expression and couldn't help but feel a warm current in her heart. "Tyrande, you don't have to waste mana on me anymore," Dejana said with a weak but loving smile. "Many sisters have tried to treat me, and even the Archdruid of Stormrage has been here several times. They tried using druid methods to extend my life, but to no avail." When Tyrande heard this, she felt a deep sadness. Looking at her mentor's weakening body, she felt a sense of powerlessness wash over her. She clenched her fists unconsciously, a firm light shining in her eyes. "High Priest, I will definitely find a way to save you." Tyrande's voice was choked with sobs. "Raise your head, child." Dejana gently patted Tyrande's hands on the bedside and said softly, "Life and death are destiny. Wealth is in heaven. Maybe this is my fate, a punishment from the goddess for my indecisive character in the past. You don't have to blame yourself too much. I have accepted this reality." Sitting on the soft pillow, Dejana looked particularly calm and serene. Although her illness could not be concealed, her refined temperament, which had become very rare in recent years, was still clearly evident. "Tyrande, I have arranged everything that needs to be explained." Dejana's voice was low but full of power. "After this war is over, you will succeed me and become the new high priest of the sisterhood." The frustrated Tyrande raised her head in shock when she heard this, her eyes full of disbelief. "Me? Is this too fast? I don't have any experience yet, maybe?" Dejana smiled softly and waved her hand, interrupting her. "Experience can be accumulated slowly. Who doesn't start from scratch in this kind of thing? And with Elune's oracle as a guarantee, your succession is justifiable." "But—" Tyrande still hesitated. Dejana seemed a little hesitant. "I know what you are worried about. Are you concerned about Maiev's reaction?" After putting everything aside, Dejana saw the world more clearly than before. Her clear eyes looked at Tyrande, her face still unchanged. With a gentle smile, she continued, "Don't worry. As I said before, everything that needs to be explained has been clearly explained. I have also anticipated the possible objections within the sisterhood in the future and have prepared for it." Dejana held Tyrande's right hand tightly, her expression becoming serious and firm. Her weak grip slightly increased, conveying her determination. "Sisters of Elune, I will leave them to you from now on," she said in a deep voice. "Maiev may be dissatisfied in the short term, but I firmly believe that she will put the overall situation first and will eventually understand and accept this decision." Tyrande opened her mouth, as if she wanted to say something, but when she saw Dejana's face as pale as paper, the words in her heart finally turned into a sigh. "I understand," Tyrande nodded solemnly. "I will do my best to let the Sisters of Elune continue to grow and live up to your expectations." Upon hearing this, Dejana showed a happy smile. "That's good, then I'll feel relieved," she said, trying to sit up straight, but exhaustion made her lean back again. Her eyes gradually became heavy due to fatigue, and it seemed they might close at any moment. However, just before she fell into a deep sleep, Dejana suddenly perked up and took off a string of crystal-clear pendants from her neck. It exuded a faint light, as if it contained mysterious power. "This is the artifact I mentioned to you before, the Tears of Elune," she said, carefully handing the pendant to Tyrande. "As the High Priest, I admit that I am not good enough. I failed to fulfill my duty as Elune's spokesperson to persuade Queen Ashara, and my personal abilities were mediocre." Dejana's eyes began to struggle, but she still insisted on finishing her last sentence. "The power of Elune's tears is extremely potent, but if the user is not strong enough, the backlash it brings is also severe. I am a living example of this." Her eyes finally closed slowly. "I believe you can do better than me." Chapter 751, Black Crow Castle. As Dejana fell into a coma again, steady and deep breathing emanated from the hospital bed. Tyrande held the Tears of Elune tightly, feeling an inexplicable emotion well up in her heart. She silently stared at the sleeping High Priest, as if she wanted to engrave this moment deeply in her memory. "High Priest, don't worry," Tyrande said softly, her tone full of firm determination. "I will not let you and Elune down. I will lead the sisterhood to a brighter future." After saying that, she carefully hung the Tears of Elune around her neck. The cold touch made her acutely aware of the heavy responsibility she shouldered. She silently bowed to the sleeping Dejana, then turned around and quietly exited the tent. Just as she walked out of the tent, a familiar voice suddenly came from the side. "It seems that our new High Priest has accepted the important task." Tyrande turned around and saw Ethan folding his arms and leaning leisurely against a short tree to greet her. Another noble girl, whom she had met not long ago, was also bowing to her in congratulations. "It seems that you already know," Tyrande smiled reluctantly, feeling a little confused in her heart. "High Priest Dejana has entrusted the future to me, but I am still a little at a loss now." Ethan came over and gently patted her shoulder. "Don't worry, I believe you are qualified for this important task. What are your plans next?" He looked at the pendant hanging around Tyrande's neck, a glimmer of understanding flashing in his eyes. Tyrande lowered her head and fell into silence for a while, her heart seeming to be full of chaos. Finally, she raised her head with a trembling voice and looked at Ethan, her eyes showing a desire for support. I need some time now to be alone and sort out my thoughts. Can you stay with me for a while?" she asked. Ethan felt the fluctuations in her emotions. He turned his head and looked at Elise, who had been paying attention not far away, and whistled to attract her attention. "Elise, did you hear everything?" Ethan said. "Your future mentor needs some private space now. I want to stay and comfort her, so you." "I can stay with Teacher Tyrande." Elise raised her hand eagerly, fearing that she would be left out. Ethan gave her a helpless look, then tapped her forehead unceremoniously. "Do I have to spell it out for you?" he said, giving the little girl a fierce look for the first time. "I mean, no, stay away." Elise covered her forehead, turned away dissatisfied, and muttered, "Just leave. Why are you so fierce?" With that, the little girl pouted and left angrily. Before leaving, Ethan could still vaguely hear her complaining, "Really, Ethan, you are not cute at all after you change back to human form." Looking at Elise's retreating back, Ethan shook his head with a wry smile, then turned to Tyrande and said, "Now that she's gone, you can have some peace and quiet. I'll be here with you until you're prepared to face everything again." Under Jared's careful planning, Ethan, who had just successfully completed a major mission, was not immediately thrown into the cruel main battlefield like a meat grinder, but was given a precious 3 days of rest. Ethan understood that these 3 days away from the front line were invaluable, and he did not want to waste his time, so he decided to fulfill his promise to Dathrema first. Therefore, he took Elise with him, and prepared to use the Upper Elf's teleportation spell to travel directly to the rear base established by the resistance forces in Black Crow Castle. Quack! Gaw! As soon as he arrived at his destination, Ethan heard a crow calling. There are 2 layers of meaning behind the name Black Crow Castle. On the one hand, there are countless black-feathered crows living around the fort, which echo the name of Black Crow Castle. On the other hand, Legend has it that the name also comes from the Lord Ravencrest family who have guarded the castle for generations. For generations, the Ravencrest family has called this place home. In the Upper Elf language, Ravencrest means crow's crown, and this family is renowned for its deep affection for crows and ravens. When the rebels rose up, the former Lord Ravencrest, in the name of King Chin, led a heroic army towards the capital city of Zin-Asaline. Although he did not achieve his ultimate goal as the first commander-in-chief of the resistance, his sacrifice and efforts garnered valuable support and time for the resistance. Today, Black Crow Fort has become a crucial base for the resistance. With the continuous efforts of a steady stream of supporters, the fortress has gradually expanded to the size of a city and has become a stronghold for the resistance. Black Crow Castle stands on the western border of the Valshara region. It is not only a strategic location, but also a transportation hub. From here, a journey south leads to Asuna, known for its strong academic atmosphere. Further south lies the shining pearl of the Night Elves, the city of Suramar. If you explore the highlands to the northeast, you will find the residence of the Tauren tribe, High Mountain. To the west and north, it directly borders the vast capital circle of Zin-Asaline. When Ethan and Elise walked out of the ancient teleportation tower of Black Crow Castle, they were astonished by the prosperity and vitality of the fortress city before them. The rebels' sophisticated weapons and equipment, along with key logistical supplies, are all allocated from here. An endless stream of caravans brought various goods from villages in Valshara, trading them in the market of Black Crow Castle. This made the temporarily designated commercial street in the city center bustling with activity. In Artisan Street, within the castle, the constant sound of iron being forged could be heard. Freshly made weapons and armor gleamed sharply in the firelight, then were skillfully bundled and loaded into vehicles, ready to be transported to frontline military camps to assist the soldiers in battle. It seemed that no leisurely figure could be found in this solid fortress city. Every resident was like a wind-up toy, busy with their tasks in an energetic, efficient, and orderly manner, collectively maintaining the city's operation and prosperity. Elise, who grew up in the leisurely paced aristocratic area of Zin-Azaline, found Black Crow Castle completely different from her familiar environment. It was the first time she had seen such a bustling and industrious urban scene, and it amazed her. "It's so shocking. Are they this busy every day?" she asked curiously, her eyes filled with keen interest in the city. Ethan also walked to the railing of the tower, overlooking the busy street scene below. After a moment of reflection, he replied, "Although I can't be 100% sure, generally speaking, the vitality and busyness here should be day after day." "All right, little girl, don't be in a daze." He gently patted Elise's head, his tone a mix of affection and helplessness. "We still have business to attend to, and we need to find a suitable place to settle down. Mr. Dazrema is still waiting for news from us." "Oh, okay." Elise reluctantly looked away from the bustling street scene and nodded obediently. "Then, let's set off." With that, she lightly climbed onto the broad back of the chimera that Ethan had transformed into, and they descended from the top of the towering mage tower. As they circled downward, Elise took the opportunity to roughly observe the overall layout of Black Crow Castle. The city, transformed from a fortified fortress, had limited living space within the city walls. Except for the upper elves who were grandly entertained by the Ravencrest clan, most of the refugees from all over were placed in temporary residential areas. Areas outside the city walls, though simple in their conditions, are brimming with life and hope. Chapter 752. Making a Staff. As a member of a prominent upper elf family, and for her significant contributions to the resistance, Elise, representing the Sunstriders, was warmly welcomed by the Lord's widow, Mrs. Ravencase. After the welcome party, she received special permission to choose a vacant mansion in the city as the residence of the Sunstrider family. Ethan accompanied Elise to the residential area. He waited patiently, watching her carefully carve the arcane mark of the Sunstrider family in front of a mansion she particularly liked. "It's done." Elise breathed a sigh of relief, a satisfied smile on her face. When the housekeeper leads the family to Black Crow Castle, they will be able to easily find our new home through this mark. Elise, a descendant of a renowned upper elf family, had received elite education since childhood. Although she was a bit nervous performing such a practical task for the first time, she quickly found her rhythm with Ethan's encouragement and company. She first contacted the Ravencase clan, who stayed at Black Crow Castle, and showed them Mrs. Ravencase's permission letter. This letter served as the perfect stepping stone, allowing her to navigate the unfamiliar city unimpeded. Next, she stepped into the solemn Temple of Elune in the city and met with the members of the Sisterhood of Elune stationed there. This time, she handed over a letter of introduction written by Tyrande. With the guarantee of the new high priest, Elise quickly won the recognition and respect of the Sisters of Elune. It is worth mentioning that Black Crow Castle is a city dominated by the Resistance Army. As the heartland of the Resistance, the Sisterhood of Elune here plays a significant role, unlike in Iceland, where their influence is gradually declining. Here, they almost function as a second government. In fact, after the war, the Night Elves gradually formed a theocratic social system, with the Sisterhood eventually taking over all governmental functions. Therefore, with the recognition of the Ravencrest clan and the Sisters of Elune, Elise was able to move freely in Black Crow Castle. Even though she was a newcomer, she could even be said to be thriving. Afterwards, Elise hurried to the big market. She stood on a high platform and announced to the passing crowd in a loud voice, "I need some laborers to help me clean an idle mansion. If you are interested, please come and sign up." Soon, dozens of able-bodied workers responded to her call. In this era of war, as long as there was food to eat, there was plenty of labor available. With the help of the workers, the long-dormant mansion was thoroughly cleaned and made brand new, exuding a fresh atmosphere from the inside out. While the workers were still busy cleaning the mansion, Elise couldn't wait to visit the bustling market. She moved among the dazzling array of stalls, carefully selecting simple and practical furniture according to her preferences. Every piece of furniture was thoughtfully considered, not only to fit the style of the mansion, but also to meet the actual needs of life. For more intricate details, she left it to the housekeeper. The mansion Elise chose originally belonged to another high elf. However, after Black Crow Castle raised the flag of resistance, the original owner and his family hurriedly moved to the distant city of Suramar to avoid the war. Before leaving, they took almost all the valuable furniture, leaving only an empty mansion. After careful cleaning and decoration, the mansion regained its former vitality and warmth. On the same day, Ethan and Elise moved into the newly refurbished mansion and started their new life in Black Crow Castle. On the evening of the second day, the moonlight filtered through the gaps in the curtains, casting a mottled pattern across the room. Letitia had already gone out to visit nearby neighbors, while Ethan set off on his way to the city alone. His destination was a staff store called Renee. In Black Crow Castle, due to the rapid increase in population, all kinds of shops were crowded with people shopping. Only shops related to arcana, such as enchantment shops, alchemy product shops, and robe shops, remained deserted. There were few pedestrians in front of these shops, which stood in sharp contrast to the bustling activity around them. In the Dark Knight Empire, arcane arts had always been regarded as the exclusive skills of the upper elves and were strictly controlled and monopolized. The upper elves made up only a very small part of the vast population of the entire empire. Ethan walked through the busy market and finally arrived at the Renee staff store. Opening the door, the scene inside the store came into view. The female owner was sitting behind the counter, watching boredly as the arcane broom in the store automatically cleaned. Dingling bell. As Ethan pushed open the door, the bell hanging on the door made a series of crisp sounds. This sound broke the tranquility of the store and lifted the spirit of the female shop owner. She stood up with a business smile on her face and greeted warmly. "Welcome. I am Renee Starwhisper, the owner of this store. Are you here to buy a staff?" Her voice was full of expectation, and it was obvious that no customers had come for a long time. Ethan looked around leisurely, sizing up the old staff shop. The furnishings in the store were simple, giving off a sense of history. The fact that it had been open to this day undoubtedly proved its extraordinary quality and reputation. He walked to the counter, smiled, and said to the shopkeeper, "Hello, Renee. I didn't come here today to buy a ready-made staff." As he spoke, he gently untied the vital Garnier twig from his back and carefully placed it on the counter. Then he made a gesture to Renee and said gently, "I hope you can help me craft this raw material into a staff." Renee looked at the extraordinary wood in front of her, a trace of curiosity flashing in her eyes, and then responded enthusiastically, "Of course, our shop also provides the service of crafting staffs from customer-provided materials. However, before making it, please allow me to carefully identify the characteristics of this material." "Please," Ethan nodded in agreement, showing great trust and patience. Renee took a deep breath, and the light blue arcane spirit began to flash on her hand. She stroked the Garnier twig gently and cautiously, as if having some mysterious communication with it. With her touch, disbelief gradually appeared on her face. She looked up at Ethan, her tone full of respect and curiosity. "Dear guest, this material of yours is extraordinary. The energy affinity it shows is simply rare in my life. Please forgive me for asking, but what kind of precious wood is it?" Ethan pondered for a moment, frowning slightly, looking a little distressed. "Do I have to answer this question?" "Oh, no." Renee noticed his hesitation, then smiled and waved her hand. "This is just my personal curiosity, and it will not have much impact on the production process of the staff. However, learning more information helps us meet your needs more accurately." She further explained, "Based on the source of the material and your specific needs, we will use corresponding processing techniques to make the staff. So at least please tell us which attribute you want this staff to be more biased towards. Affinity. Is it arcane, natural, or divine?" "Well?" After listening to Renee's explanation, Ethan scratched his cheek with his index finger in embarrassment. After thinking for a moment, he replied, "I want a magic weapon that can take into account both arcane magic and natural power. Can you make such a staff?" Upon hearing this unexpected request, Renee's eyes flashed with a look of surprise. She pondered for a while and then said seriously, "Although few people have ordered such a dual-attribute staff, it is indeed possible. Before, our store had the ability to make it, but you definitely need a dual-attribute staff." "A staff?" "If you focus on a single attribute, the bonus of this staff your spellcasting ability will be even higher. After all, such a precious material cannot be changed once it is made." After listening to Renee's reminder, Ethan breathed a sigh of relief and said with a smile, "As long as you can do it, then please, Renee, help me make a staff with both arcane and natural properties." With a gentle smile, Renee nodded slightly and said, "Okay, let's customize it according to your wishes. In addition, do you have any special requirements or preferences for the appearance of the staff?" "Of course, this is the sketch of the appearance I designed for the staff. See if you can make it based on this." Without hesitation, Ethan took out a carefully drawn design sketch from his pocket and handed it to Renee. As the design drawing unfolded, Renee's eyes flashed with wonder. She didn't expect that this customer was so professional. Ethan added, "In addition, I have also prepared some special materials that may be helpful during the production process." As he spoke, he took out a small pile of materials that shone with a mysterious luster from his package. After all, Ethan is a master of alchemy in the world of Harry Potter, but he has only made wands, and he is still a novice in making staffs. In addition, he had limited time, so he chose to leave this work to the local master stickmaker with superb skills. However, this does not mean that he does not have his own vision for the future staff. Seeing Ethan's professional and meticulous preparation, Renee's expression became solemn. Facing such an expert customer, she knew that she could not take it lightly, and must do her best to ensure that she created a staff that satisfied him. Chapter 753, Passing by Neltharion. After paying the deposit, Ethan walked out of the store. He looked up at the blue sky, stretched comfortably, and sighed with relief, feeling accomplished. The arcane civilization of the Dark Knight Empire is indeed well-deserved. It is efficient, he thought. If you place an order this evening, you will be able to get your favorite staff by tomorrow evening. At that moment, a sudden commotion erupted among the crowd not far away. Ethan looked sideways curiously and saw a few people gathering together, discussing something nervously. Hey, what you said isn't true, is it? One person asked, looking horrified. It's absolutely true. I saw it with my own eyes. That crazy dragon is flying towards us, another person replied firmly. Oh my god, then we have to escape quickly. With the current defense strength of Black Crow Castle, how can we withstand the Black Dragon King's attack? Another 10 people shouted in panic. Everyone, please be patient, and let's see what the temporary city lord has to say first. Maybe the Black Dragon King is just passing by and will not attack us, a calmer voice comforted. Ethan listened to the discussion, a hint of surprise flashing in his eyes. He thought to himself that Malfurion had indeed begun to take action. It seemed that the battlefield on the Asaline front line was about to undergo a huge change. He walked quickly back to the Sunchaser's home. As soon as he entered the door, he saw Elise circling anxiously in the hall with a letter. Ah, you're finally back. Seeing Ethan slowly walking in, she immediately approached him and complained, Why did you take so long? Mrs. Ravencase asked me to give you this letter. It's from the front. Mrs. Ravencase was the widow of the late Lord Ravencase and the mother of Elizana. She now temporarily served as the city lord of Black Crow Castle, shouldering the important task of protecting the city. Ethan took the letter and opened it eagerly, scanning every word on the paper. The letter was written by Malfurion and detailed their plan of action. In short, they intended to help the Tauren by luring Neltharion away. However, Ethan didn't have high hopes for Malfurion's plan to succeed. He knew very well that Neltharion was known for his cunning and wit among the Dragon Kings. He was by no means an ordinary adversary and would not be easily deceived. Due to the excessive use of the Dragon Soul, Neltharion's body now contained powerful energy, but this power was like an unstable bomb, threatening his life at all times. His body was almost bursting from the force. This kind of pain and threat made him extremely alert, and he would never leave his lair easily until this problem was solved. At midnight, the residents of Black Crow Castle were awakened by a deafening roar of a dragon. They looked up and saw a huge black dragon passing over the city. Its enormous wings blocked the moonlight, casting a massive shadow. Ethan's eyes were as sharp as an eagle's, and he noticed something strange about the black dragon. Part of Neltharion's chest was roughly fixed with huge nails and metal armor. These crude devices seemed to be trying hard to keep his body from collapsing further. However, this was only a stopgap measure that temporarily alleviated his pain. Despite these devices, Neltharion's body was still riddled with cracks and as fragile as broken porcelain. These cracks spread across his body like spider webs, reminding him that his predicament was not completely resolved. Neltharion's flight direction pointed unmistakably to High Mountain, which was his lair and the place he considered the safest. Ethan watched the black dragon disappear into the night sky and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Malfurion's plan had failed after all. This act of seduction did not allow Neltharion to leave his lair for long. Elise, I've decided, Ethan said, gently crumpling the letter in his hand. Ethan used magic to turn it into fly ash in an instant, then looked at Ellie. Tomorrow afternoon, once I get the staff, I will set off for High Mountain immediately. What are your plans? Will you stay at Black Crow Castle or return to the frontline military camp? My personal suggestion. No need to say any more, Ethan, Ellie interrupted him, with a hint of stubbornness in her tone. I have decided that I will return to the front line to find Ms. Tyrande. Ethan fell into a brief silence. He knew very well the character of Ellie. Once she made a decision, it would be difficult to change it. He sighed softly, then gently touched her forehead. Okay, now that you have decided, go ahead. I just hope you won't regret your choice in the future. After dinner the next day, Ethan came to the shop, carefully put away the completed staff, and then took a deep breath. Under the influence of magic, his whole body instantly transformed into a majestic eagle. He spread his broad wings, flapped them vigorously, and flew high into the sky, disappearing into the vast night. Ellie also left Black Crow Castle from the teleportation tower. Whoa! Following a slight sound of space fluctuations, as soon as Ellie stepped out of the teleportation area of the military camp, she saw several figures flashing out of the teleportation array next door almost simultaneously. They were bears with majestic bodies walking upright, but their movements and expressions revealed a spirituality and wisdom different from those of wild beasts. Suddenly, one of the black and white bear men had just stepped out of the teleportation array. With an agility that was extremely inconsistent with his huge body, he jumped outside the tent on the side and then bent down on the grass to vomit. Ellie was stunned. She looked at the upper elf mage who was in charge of the teleportation array in confusion and asked, "Excuse me, where did these bear men come from?" Ahem. The bear man who was still vomiting had recovered. He had a goatee and a wry smile on his face and corrected, "Miss, we are not werebears, but Pandaren." He rubbed his stinging temples and continued, "I'm really sorry for letting you see such an unseemly side of me. Although the teleportation technique is convenient and fast, I can't get used to the nauseating feeling during the teleportation process every time." Speaking of this, he seemed to recall his previous discomfort, with a pained expression on his face. Ellie was startled by his reaction, her face turning slightly pale, and she involuntarily stepped back. The Pandaren tried to calm his discomfort and gave her an apologetic smile. "Old Lay, look, you scared this kid." A gentle and helpless female voice came softly from behind the Pandaren, who was still trying to calm down. Ellie looked around and saw a beautiful night elf woman with blue hair walking towards her. Her long blue hair was delicately tied into a single ponytail, swaying gently as she walked, looking both heroic and feminine. This woman wore a pair of leather armor that had been repaired many times. The marks on the armor seemed to tell the story of the fierce battles she had experienced not long ago. She clearly looked like she had just grown up, just a little older than Ellie, but she exuded a heroic spirit that Ellie had never experienced from her upper elf companions. The woman walked up to Ellie, knelt down with a smile, and comforted her in a gentle voice. "Little girl, don't be afraid. These Pandaren are here to help us fight against the Burning Legion's reinforcements. They may look a little scary on the outside, but in fact, they have very gentle tempers and are kind-hearted good partners. By the way, I forgot to introduce myself." Having said this, the blue-haired woman stood up and stretched out her right hand to Ellie. The hand was still bandaged, apparently injured in battle. She introduced herself. "I am Chandris." Chandris Feathermoon, a trainee priestess of the Sisters of Elune, approached with a voice full of concern and warmth. "Little sister, why are you alone in the military camp? Are you separated from your family?" Her tone mad, Alice feel inexplicably at ease. Alice gently held Chandris's hand and repeated her name thoughtfully. "Chandris! Chandris!" Her eyes flashed with surprise, and she suddenly covered her mouth, exclaiming, "You are the senior sister Chandris that Tyrande often mentioned. Why are you here?" She glanced at Chandris and her comrades, noting their somewhat disheveled appearance. Out of politeness, she refrained from voicing all her doubts. Chandris looked down at her clothes with a wry smile. "It's a long story," she said softly. "Do you know Miss Tyrande? Do you think Ethan really saved her?" "Oh," a female voice full of excitement suddenly sounded from behind Chandris. A tall woman, also clad in leather armor, jumped out and hung onto Chandris without any regard for decorum. She poked her head out from Chandris's shoulder with a gossipy look on her face. "Is the legendary hero who fell from the sky and accidentally captured the heart of Priestess Tyrande about to show up? Is he in DBB now?" Chandris, amused by her curiosity, became a little impatient. She elbowed Ilandella's toned belly and turned away calmly. "If you don't speak, no one will treat you like a mute." Yilin clutched her stomach in an exaggerated manner, her face contorted in mock pain, as if she had been seriously injured. Her funny appearance made everyone around her laugh, dissipating the previously tense atmosphere. Alice stood aside, witnessing the playful interaction between the two. She couldn't help but feel a trace of envy. She thought silently, "Is this Miss Tyrande's adopted daughter and the one I should call senior sister? I really want to be friends with her." She completely ignored the fact that the behavior of the two in front of her was entirely different from the aristocratic education she had received since childhood. In the etiquette and rules of the aristocracy, such behavior was simply unbelievable. However, after experiencing the baptism of the real battlefield, Alice began to re-examine her own values and outlook on life. Deep in her heart, something was quietly changing. Chapter 754. Heading to High Mountain. Just as Alilay Sunstrider and Chandra's Feathermoon met in the military camp, Ethan also embarked on a journey to High Mountain. The high mountains of this era have not yet been dominated by the Tauren, and the majestic Thunder Totem has not yet risen on this land. At this time, the true rulers of the High Mountains are the Black Dragons who have made their home here. Based on the information provided by Malfurion, Ethan followed the winding main river all the way north and gradually climbed up. After a long journey, he finally arrived at the western foothills of the High Mountains and found a village where Tauren live, Hezong Village. However, at this moment, Hezong Village was shrouded in a cloud of sadness. In the village, Tauren, who had been injured by the Shadow Flame Dragon Breath, lay in pain next to a tent with a flying flag, their wails echoing through the air. Not far away, corpses wrapped tightly in white cloth lay quietly, telling the story of the tragic battle that had just occurred. Although Neltharion's crazed attack had passed, the Tauren still maintained a high degree of vigilance for threats from the air. When Ethan's figure appeared near Rivermain Village, the Tauren guards outside the village immediately tensed up. Their bows and arrows were already aimed at the uninvited guest, ready to attack at any moment. "Please wait. Hold your fire." A familiar voice came from behind the group of nervous Tauren guards. Maiev Shadowsong walked out slowly and said to the Tauren guards who were holding bows and ready to attack, "Don't rush to attack. That person should be a fellow druid I know." Maiev had once seen Ethan transform into a soaring eagle, so even from this far away, she could accurately identify that unique figure. With a gentle breeze blowing by, Ethan landed safely. Under the vigilant gaze of the Tauren, he slowly transformed back into his human form, causing the surrounding guards to gradually lower their bows and arrows, their tense nerves relaxing. "Maiev, why are you here?" Ethan didn't waste time on unnecessary pleasantries and asked directly, "What's the situation now?" Maiev shook her head gently, a wry smile on her face. "The situation is not optimistic. Due to the anger of the fallen Black Dragon King, the Tauren tribe has suffered a significant blow in recent days. If it weren't for the eagle demigod Uenhala, who fought hard despite his injuries and was willing to be injured again to force back the violent Neltharion, I'm afraid the situation would be even worse now." In Maiev's concise narrative, Ethan gradually understood the current situation. In this era, Tauren society still maintains the ancient tribal system. Whenever there is a major issue that needs to be decided, the chiefs of each tribe gather together and decide whether to implement a certain proposal through voting. Looking back, before Ethan successfully persuaded Huan High Mountain, Huan had already successfully persuaded all the chiefs to agree to fight against the Burning Legion with his prestige and wisdom, eliminating the need to unify their opinions. Because of this, the operation of garnering support for the Night Elves was carried out smoothly. However, Neltharion's fierce attack brought considerable losses to the Tauren tribe, which lacked effective anti-air defenses. Although these losses have not yet touched the foundation of the Tauren, the tribes are now most concerned not with Ezeline's war situation, but with how to free themselves from the terrifying shadow of the Black Dragon. In this context, even the prestigious Huan High Mountain was unable to prevent the Tauren from withdrawing their army. This was a common decision made by all tribes in order to protect themselves. Although Huan was unwilling to do so, he had no choice but to accept the reality. As a self-proclaimed Tauren expert, Ethan already knew the remaining information and did not need Maiev to reveal too much. In the vast land of High Mountain, the challenges ahead were clear. There are many Tauren from various clans. However, among these clans, only the 5 major clans have real influence in voting rights: Gowling, Blood Totem, Rivermain, Skyhorn, and Lintai. The chief of the Gowling clan, Huan Gowling, the great chief of all Tauren, firmly supports the Tauren sending troops. Ethan's mission is to appease the chiefs who have not yet expressed their positions. The reason why Maiev appears here is not complicated. To support the Tauren, one must face the powerful Neltharion. According to the message sent back by Malfurion, Neltharion has done some research on magic, making the Dragon's Nest extremely sensitive to arcane magic. This means that to avoid detection by the Black Dragon King, the reinforcements sent should ideally be spellcasters who focus on divine magic or natural power. Among the strong members of the Resistance, when it comes to non-arcane spellcasters, apart from Ethan, Tyrande, and Maiev, the two divine priests are undoubtedly the most suitable candidates. However, Tyrande has newly taken over the position of High Priest and has many matters related to the sisterhood in the military camp that need her personal attention. At this moment, Maiev was having trouble with Tyrande, and their relationship could be described as one of mutual dislike. In fact, it was more that Maiev did not want to meet Tyrande. So, she simply volunteered to take over the support task, not only remaining invisible, but also doing her part for the Resistance. On the contrary, it was Ethan's arrival that surprised Maiev. After she came here, she could not find Malfurion and the others. She thought she would face this challenge alone, but unexpectedly, she met him here. When she learned that Ethan was also here to deal with Neltharion, Maiev showed a relieved smile, as if she had found a solid backing she could rely on. So, she enthusiastically led Ethan to the tent prepared for her by the Tauren, intending to explain to him in detail the attitudes and positions of the various Tauren clans. The Blood Totem clan is actually not difficult to convince, Maiev said first. This clan, known for its bravery and warlike nature, has always admired strength and likes to use fists to solve problems. They have long been impressed by the powerful strength of Chief One, so they firmly stand on the side of the main war faction. Having said this, Maiev sighed softly. The real problem lies with the remaining three clans. The first is the most determined anti-war faction, the Rivermain clan, Maiev continued. This clan believes in the way of shamans and has many spellcasters. Most of the shamans who now provide treatment for the wounded come from the Rivermain clan. Therefore, they enjoy high prestige among the Tauren tribe. The chief of the Rivermain clan, Ahul Rivermain, firmly opposes sending troops to reinforce. He believes that the current priority is to heal the tribe's physical and mental trauma caused by the war. Maiev paused for a moment, seeming to collect her thoughts, and then continued. Next is the Skyhorn clan. The warriors of this clan are also strong and brave. They advocate taking the opportunity to launch a surprise attack to drive the Black Dragon out of High Mountain. However, this strategy is not completely consistent with our goals, so we need further communication and coordination. Expelling the Black Dragon? This is a bit too confident. Ethan raised his eyebrows in surprise and said with a hint of joking, just based on these Tauren, who don't even have an air force. Maiev smiled bitterly, rubbed her temples, and explained, that's the crux of the problem. Recently, with the tacit approval of Ornhara, the Skyhorn clan is actively trying to establish contact with the giant eagles soaring in the sky of High Mountain. Their intention is to tame these huge raptors to make up for the Tauren's shortcomings in aerial power. I'm afraid this is a drop in the bucket, Ethan shook his head. He shook his head disapprovingly. There is no need for Neltharion to intervene personally. Even the dozens of black dragons in the lair are more than the Tauren can handle. The power of an adult dragon is beyond their imagination. Maiev nodded in agreement. I think so too, but the chief of the Skyhorn clan, Moda 917 Skyhorn, is extremely stubborn. Once he sets his mind on something, it's difficult to change it. 5 days ago, he set off with the elite members of his tribe, vowing to tame the giant eagle and make it available to the Tauren. This is simply nonsense, senseless and reckless. Ethan shook his head helplessly. What about the last clan, Lin Ti? What is their stance? Maiev continued. The position of the Woodhoof clan is relatively neutral, and they are the ones I am currently working hard to win over. This clan has long lived in the dense mountain forests of High Mountain and has a deep connection with nature. In fact, they were the first Minotaur nation to reconnect with Venelius. She paused and explained. The chief of Lino, Varg, is rather indecisive. Deep down, he longs to follow the footsteps of Cenarius and reclaim our world from the clutches of the devil. However, the recent attacks on the Tauren have left him hesitant and unable to make a final choice. His uncertainty directly affects the results of the 5 races voting, and his decision will determine which party has the advantage. Maiev spread her hands helplessly. I have tried my best to persuade Chief Varg, but he still can't make up his mind. It's really frustrating. I've been working with them for a long time, but I've achieved no results at all, she said, lowering her head, her voice tinged with disappointment. It seems I am not suited for a job that requires negotiation. Perhaps the priest was right to choose Tyrande as her successor. Ethan wisely chose not to respond to that comment, cleverly avoiding the topic. He did not want to get involved in the high priest dispute between Tyrande and Maiev. After all, only a fool would willingly place himself between two women who are arguing, especially if he has a good relationship with both. Chapter 755, The Conflict of the Tauren. Ethan held his chin, lost in thought. After a while, he said thoughtfully, Maiev, I want to confirm. The voting situation of the 5 major Tauren clans is now 2-2. The Woodhoof clan is still hesitating? Maiev nodded and confirmed. Yes, this is the current situation. Ethan raised a new question. Maiev, have you conducted a detailed investigation on the number of black dragons in High Mountain, excluding Neltharion? Maiev answered affirmatively. Yes, although after Neltharion went mad, even his dragon queen Sinestra could not bear his madness and fled. According to my investigation, there are still dozens of adult dragons and hundreds of baby dragons active near his lair. As for the young dragons and dragon eggs, I have not found the entrance to the nest at all, so I have no relevant information. But there must be more than the number of baby dragons. The combat effectiveness of the young dragons is almost negligible. With their immature breath, as long as they are not hit head-on, any ordinary soldier can easily defeat these baby dragons. Although those little dragons that have just emerged from their shells have the blood of the Dragon Clan, at this stage they are not yet able to show the power that the Dragon Clan should have. However, the young dragons are a completely different situation. Judging from the evaluation standards of the Night Elves, the aerial power of the young dragons with high intelligence is at least equal to that of the two-headed Chimera, and may even be more powerful. They have begun to show the unique ferocity and fearlessness of the dragons, which no army can neglect. Adult dragons are the backbone of the Dragon Clan. Their strength and wisdom are unparalleled. Although they do not reach the legendary level in terms of destructive power alone, an adult dragon is no less than a legendary strongman. Although there are only a dozen dragons left in the high mountains, if an effective response method cannot be found, once a war breaks out, these dozen dragons will be enough to completely destroy the entire Tauren tribe. Their existence is like the sword of Damocles hanging over the Minotaur's head, making people feel uneasy. Maiev saw the flash of thought in Ethan's golden eyes, and her heart moved. She couldn't help but ask, "What are you doing? Are you really planning to drive the Black Dragon out of High Mountain?" Ethan came back to his senses and looked up at Maiev strangely. "Otherwise, are you going to continue to rub elbows with the Linho clan? We don't have the time now." He paused and continued. "The front line is still under tremendous pressure, and the Burning Legion's reinforcements will gather more and more. We must launch a decisive battle as soon as possible, make a good plan, and solve the Tauren's worries once and for all." His tone was firm and decisive, and he was obviously fully prepared. Maiev was quite speechless at Ethan's unique way of thinking. "Wait a minute, your purpose here is not to convince the Tauren tribe, but to deal with Neltharion." "That's true," Ethan shrugged easily and said calmly. "Didn't I say it from the beginning? My goal is to deal with Neltharion." "But—" Maiev seemed to want to say something else. "Look, aren't I trying to think of ways to convince the Tauren right now?" Ethan interrupted her, smiled, and patted her shoulder. "If you don't show the Tauren some actual benefits, you can't just rely on words to change their minds. That would be naive. Besides, by your own admission, you are not good at persuading others, so why don't we do something we are better at?" Ethan's words made Maiev deep in thought. She looked up at him, a hint of understanding flashing in her eyes. Maybe he was right. Since talking can't do it, they really need to change their strategy and do something they are really good at. If we really can't be sure, we might as well take a two-pronged approach. Ethan observed the wavering on Maev's face and took the opportunity to suggest. On the one hand, we will continue to maintain communication with the Woodhoof clan. If we can convince the hesitant chief, that would naturally be the best outcome. But before that, We should talk to the people of the High Mountain, Blood Totem, and Rivermain clans to gauge their determination and stance. If the chief of the Skyhorn clan returns, inform me immediately. Oh, okay. Maiev rubbed her forehead helplessly and sighed. It's up to you. Do whatever you want. I just hope you don't incite the Tauren and the Black Dragons into unnecessary fights. After all, these soldiers are the reinforcements we urgently need to send to the front line. Ethan smiled slightly and said reassuringly, Don't worry, there is no gain without effort. If you don't take risks, you won't achieve anything. I will be careful. Despite Ethan's words, Maiev couldn't help but roll her eyes and think to herself, Is this really appropriate? Why do I always feel a little uneasy? How much do you know about the Black Dragon's weaknesses? Ethan asked, staring at the burly Tauren warrior in front of him, who was holding a spear. His tone was probing. The Tauren stroked his horns in confusion. After thinking for a moment, he said, I don't know if this is a weakness, but since Neltharion betrayed the Dragon Legion, none of his black dragons seem willing to live there. It seems there is some deadly threat hidden in the Black Dragon King's lair. Oh? Ethan narrowed his eyes slightly. Although this information seemed trivial, when he thought of the reason for Neltharion's fall, a thought suddenly flashed in his mind. So the cave that was once Neltharion's lair has now become a forbidden area for the Black Dragons? The Tauren standing in front of him was named Les Gowling, the brother of Huan Gowling. Ever since Huan left the tribe to support the Night Elves, the heavy responsibility of the rear had fallen on Les's shoulders. Lesse nodded and said affirmatively, That's true. In that cave, apart from a large number of Drogbol taking care of the Black Dragon's eggs, there are only a few dragon people staying there. Oh, by the way, there have been a lot of goblins there recently, and I don't know what they are up to. Drogbar, a race known as stone trolls by the world, have a daunting appearance, ferocious and ugly. It is rumored that they are also creations of the Titans. However, they are similar to the Trogs, except that their creation process does not seem to be perfect, and they are regarded as failed creations of Tycoon. Despite this, Drogbar are quite worthy of their identity as Titan creations, possessing an innate strong affinity with the earth. It is precisely because of this that they were enslaved by the Black Dragon army of Neltharion, the guardian of the earth. Ethan vaguely remembered that in the original book, their history of slavery did not end until the smoke of the ancient war cleared. At that time, Chief Huan High Mountain led the resistance of the Tauren and Drogbar, wielding the hammer of Khosgoroth, the pillar of creation, and finally drove away Deathwing, allowing Drogbar to be free again. As for the goblins, these little creatures, who only have interests in their eyes, possess amazing smelting skills. The reason why they appear on this land is for no other reason than to cast strong armor for the Black Dragon in exchange for the wealth they need. Ahur, the chief of the Rivermain clan, was a Tauren with an elegant appearance and a calm temperament. His demeanor was unlike that of other Tauren, who were tall and thick. He wore a robe covered with colorful bird feathers and held a zigzag wooden staff, exuding a mysterious and solemn aura. Mr. Kuye, what do you have to say? There are still many wounded among my tribe waiting for me to treat them. The chief, who was well versed in shamanism, frowned slightly. Looking directly at Ethan, there was a hint of impatience in his tone. If you still intend to lobby us to send troops, I advise you to give up. The Rivermain tribe will never abandon any injured tribesman to participate in a battle. We have nothing to do with the war, Ahur declared firmly. Ethan waved his hand gently, signaling Ahur to calm down. Don't speak too soon. Let me ask you a question first. He looked around at the chiefs present and slowly said, If we remove the threat of the Black Dragon, are you willing to sacrifice for the safety of Azeroth? Are you willing to make a contribution? That's natural. Desgo, the chief of Blood Totem, stood up suddenly, patted his chest heavily, and said heroically, As long as there is a glorious war, the warriors of Blood Totem will definitely charge forward and never back down. Hearing this, Ahur couldn't help but sneer and retort, Even if it means the death of the clan, are you willing to do so? Chief Desgo, I advise you to think more about your clansmen. What I'm talking about is the will of all the tribesmen. Desgo Blood Totem glared and retorted without any sign of weakness. Don't think that everyone is as timid as you, Rivermain. Ahur was so angry that he was speechless for a moment, and the situation suddenly became tense. Enough, enough, Ethan shouted loudly, trying to interrupt the heated argument between the two chiefs. There was a dumbfounded expression on his face, and he made appeasing movements with his hands to signal them to calm down. Two respected chiefs arguing will not resolve our differences. It will only make us more divided. Please calm down, everyone, and discuss the problem rationally. He looked around, his eyes moving between the two angry chiefs, then took a deep breath and said in a calm tone, I raise this question not to create conflicts between you, but to relieve your worries. Lesser Gowling touched the braid on his chin in confusion, frowning, as if he was trying to understand the meaning of Ethan's words. How do you mean? He asked. A mysterious smile appeared on Ethan's face, and he shook his head. I can't tell you everything yet. The specific plan needs to be fine-tuned based on the subsequent situation. But don't worry, I will go to Neltharion's lair first. After some investigation, we will make a final decision once we understand the situation clearly. Chapter 756. Goblin Ethan stood on the top of the cliff, staring deeply at the mountains below. Although he did not dare to claim he could remember every detail in the history of Warcraft, he was familiar with the fall of Neltharion. The instigator behind this incident was none other than Zoth, one of the ancient gods, who lurked in the shadows, constantly stirring up trouble. As the dragon that served as the guardian of the earth among the 5 dragon kings, Neltharion's power was deeply rooted in the very core of this vast land. The authority given to him by the Titans allowed him to draw infinite power from the center of the earth. However, it also made him more susceptible to the dark and ancient existence sealed deep within Azeroth, the ancient gods, whose power was seductive and corrupting. In fact, Neltharion was not the first guardian force left behind by a Titan to be tempted by the ancient gods. Loken, the king of wisdom, also suffered the same fate. Loken, a Titan guardian, was supposed to work with other Titan guardians and the aspect dragons to guard the sealed old god and protect the planet after the Titans left Azeroth. But under the long temptation and corruption of the ancient gods, he finally fell and was sentenced by the other guardians. This incident proved that even those with rock-solid hearts could not resist the cunning tricks of the ancient gods. They were like tempting and depraved demons. Once they captured a flaw in the soul, they would exploit it, amplifying the weaknesses of human nature until they completely controlled their will. Ethan didn't know what the spiritual flaw was for Neltharion, but it was irrefutable that he had been corrupted by Nenzoth and had become a puppet controlled by dark forces. Therefore, Ethan, unlike others who did not know the truth, never expected to restore Neltharion's sanity through words or other methods. Instead, he agreed with Malygos, Lord of the Blue Dragons, that the only way to deal with Neltharion was to eliminate him. At this time, under the leadership of the Tauren Guide, they had been exploring the vast high mountains for a long time. This vast mountain range hid endless secrets. Even the Tauren did not dare to claim they fully understood this land, and Neltharion's lair was hidden within these mountains. Although the Tauren knew the general direction, they did not dare to approach easily in the face of the powerful presence of the Black Dragon. Let's say goodbye here, the Tauren Guide said in a steady voice. Ahead is the mountain range you are looking for. Black dragons often appear near here, but we don't know the specific location of the Black Dragon's lair. May the Earth Mother protect you. After bidding farewell to the Tauren Guide, Ethan had to continue the rest of the adventure on his own. But he was not alone. After Maiev learned of Ethan's plan and heard that he was going to the dragon's lair in person, she offered to accompany him without hesitation. Ethan's original strategy was to find a black dragon nearby, then quietly follow it to its secret lair. However, contrary to expectations, not a single black dragon appeared in the vast mountain range that day, rendering Ethan's plan futile. They had to resort to Plan B, conducting a large-scale search without alerting the black dragon. This kind of requirement was challenging for most, but Ethan was different. Fortunately, he was a druid, and his perception was sharp enough. He used his unique skill Ask Nature to communicate with the surrounding natural elements, and then used animal talk technique and plant talk technique, control animals, and control plants, to activate all the surrounding animals and plants. In an instant, the animals and plants in the entire mountain range became his eyes and ears. Under their guidance, Ethan quickly captured a subtle clue. Following the news brought by a certain animal, he continued his search. Ethan and Maiev walked on the soft soil, following the path through the mountain forest. Suddenly, Ethan heard a strange sound that broke the silence. It wasn't the whistling of the wind, but a more complex sound with a certain rhythm. He listened carefully and quickly recognized it as a language, though the tone was quite strange, both funny and harsh. Ethan immediately activated his spiritual power, his psychic tentacles extending in all directions, eagerly searching for the source of the sound. After some effort, he pinpointed the direction, a few hundred meters to the north, where a deep path was hidden in the dense woods. Like a seasoned hunter, Ethan calmly and cautiously left his original position to investigate. He signaled to Maiev to wait where she was while he quietly approached the source of the mysterious sound. In this unpredictable mountain range, the ethereal sound could have been the wind singing among the ancient peaks. However, as he cautiously approached the path, the sound suddenly ceased. Ethan immediately stopped and held his breath, waiting for any developments. Not long after, the noisy chatter resumed, resembling the chirping of birds. At that moment, Ethan finally understood the nature of the voices, making him even more cautious with each step. He listened intently, trying to discern the number of people from the bustling conversation. After careful consideration, he deduced that at least 3 or 4 people were talking. Whether this was good news or not, he couldn't tell. Suddenly, another sound reached his ears, the harsh noise of shovels digging into earth and rocks. To avoid making more noise, Ethan used wilderness transformation to turn himself into a poisonous snake, hiding in the grass and quietly approaching the unknown people. These individuals never imagined that someone else would be in this deserted place. They were in the light, while Ethan was in the dark, giving him an absolute advantage in this game of hide-and-seek. A faint beam of light illuminated the open space ahead. Ethan hid in a concealed corner and carefully poked his head out. To his surprise, he recognized the figures. They were goblins. Compared to the elegant elves, goblins appeared short and thin, their bodies seemingly made of skin and bones, with disproportionately large heads. Their sharp teeth and slender nails shone coldly in the dim light, but other than that, they didn't seem to be much of a threat. However, Ethan knew better than to underestimate these goblins. Their race's greedy nature was deeply ingrained, especially when they gathered in groups. Their desire for wealth was almost insatiable. If they were merely greedy, they might not be feared, but in Azeroth, goblins were far from being simple creatures. They possessed extraordinary intelligence, making them stand out among many other beings. In Azeroth, goblins were a highly intelligent race. In the dispute between the Alliance and the Horde, 10,000 years from now, goblins would rely on their wisdom to take over almost all of the Horde's technological creations. Even during the ancient war 10,000 years ago, goblins' talents in the technical field were already evident. "These ores are far from enough," a goblin muttered dissatisfiedly, disappointment written all over his wrinkled face. "It's just a little, and I can't even make a decent application film." "How many times have I told you that all the ore here has been mined by us?" Another goblin responded angrily. He looked almost identical to the goblin who had spoken earlier, at least in Ethan's eyes, but his skin was slightly lighter, and his expression showed signs of fatigue. Turning to his companions, he complained, "We need to find a new mine quickly, or we won't be able to keep this job." On a hill not far away, a crisp knocking sound echoed from a narrow tunnel, breaking the silence of the valley. This was the source of the mining noise Ethan had heard earlier. It turned out to be these goblins, sweating profusely as they mined tirelessly. Ethan watched them and suddenly noticed another goblin approaching from a distance. This goblin held an old oil lamp, its light casting a faint glow through the lampshade. He was dragging a huge sack behind him, almost as large as his own body. Despite their short stature, goblins possess remarkable strength. The new goblin's face was lit up with an excited smile, a stark contrast to the other goblin's weary expressions. "Good news. I discovered a new small mine. There's a lot of iron ore hidden in it. We're lucky this time," he announced. The other goblin's eyes lit up at the news. "Awesome," the grumbling goblin exclaimed, jumping up excitedly. "We have to act quickly. This is not an easy task." "Even if we find a new mine, it won't benefit us," another goblin complained amidst the excitement. "We work so hard to mine, but in the end, we don't even get a penny. What's the point?" He kicked a pebble on the ground in frustration. "What's the reward for talking to a dragon? You really think too much," another goblin laughed sarcastically. "Let's get to work quickly and stop whining here." Chapter 757, High Mountain Mountains. At this moment, Maiev had quietly approached Ethan, recognizing that the snake was his transformation. The impulse in her heart almost made her want to rush forward immediately, but after working with Ethan for a long time, she knew very well that he would never tolerate her reckless behavior. Therefore, she could only stare closely at the busy goblins. They seemed to be immersed in the busyness of mining and were unaware of the arrival of the two intruders. "Do we need to avoid them?" Maiev asked in a low voice. "No." Ethan's answer satisfied her. "We will kill them directly. We will not let them go, even for 10 days. If a creature directly related to the Black Dragon appeared in front of Ethan, such as a young dragon or a draconian, he would act cautiously and never take action rashly, for fear of arousing the vigilance of the Black Dragons. However, goblins were completely different. In addition to their outstanding intelligence, the goblins of Azeroth were no different from their kind, distributed in various worlds in other aspects, especially in terms of reproductive ability. They had an amazing reproductive history. It is no exaggeration to say that once a small number of goblins appear in a certain place, their numbers will mushroom rapidly, and they can be seen everywhere like garbage. If their individual strength were not too weak, goblins would undoubtedly become the most ideal cannon fodder race. In this context, a group of goblins disappearing inexplicably would not arouse the Black Dragon's vigilance at all. Even the goblins themselves were suspicious of such incidents. Being hunted by birds of prey, attacked by ferocious beasts, or used as snacks or tools to vent anger by black dragons, goblins have countless natural enemies in nature. While they multiply like crazy, goblins die in various ways every moment. For goblins, this is a normal part of life. Following Ethan's gesture, a cold smile flashed in Maiev's eyes, and then she rushed out like an arrow from a string. It wasn't until the third goblin fell limply to the ground that any goblin discovered the two's surprise attack. "There is an intruder! Come quickly! There is an intruder!" A goblin scream cut through the quiet night sky. This sudden cry made all the goblins stop what they were doing and turn their heads to look. However, the next moment, a scream rang out, and Maiev appeared beside the goblin at some point, the moon blade in her hand already cutting the other person's throat. Another goblin screamed and rushed towards Maiev, trying to knock her to the ground. However, Maiev seemed to have eyes on the back of her head and nimbly dodged the collision. But the goblins did not give up, and one of them stabbed Maiev in the eye with a knife. However, the power of the goblins was too small. Maiev, known for her agility, became a formidable opponent when facing them. Such attacks were not worth mentioning. Maiev easily waved the moonblade in her hand and blocked the knife. At this moment, another goblin jumped on Maiev's shoulder, and the knife in his hand almost stabbed her ear. However, Maiev calmly turned her head and avoided this fatal blow. She quickly stretched out a hand, grabbed the goblin firmly, then yanked it off her shoulders and threw it out with all her strength. The goblin who was thrown out by Maiev let out a scream in the air, the sound echoing in the night sky, and then gradually disappearing. Meanwhile, Maiev quickly turned to deal with another goblin trying to jump on top of her. However, unexpectedly, before she could take action, the goblin fell mid-jump. It turned out that a thick vine had wrapped around him at some point, tying him tightly, and then fell heavily to the ground. Immediately afterwards, several vines with sharp thorns flew out from the surrounding grass, like flexible snakes, and tied up other goblins. The goblins screamed in terror, their voices filled with despair. One of the goblins, in a panic, bumped into his companion in the distance. The two stumbled to the ground, hugging each other, while another goblin unfortunately fell into a pile of rocks, groaning in pain. At this moment, the enemy's formation was in chaos. Maev seized the opportunity, waved the moonblade in her hand, and launched a ruthless massacre among the goblins. Her movements were quick and elegant, as if she were dancing, harvesting the lives of her enemies with ease. Ethan Moonstone walked out of the grass where he had been hiding. He stared closely at the fallen goblins and controlled the vines to deliver finishing blows to ensure they were truly dead, preventing any from pretending to be dead for a sneak attack or escape. For goblins, pretending to be dead is a common tactic. Sure enough, after being tied up by the vines, 2 or 3 more dead goblins suddenly started struggling, but their little strength was no match for the thick vines. In the end, they all truly died. They are all dead. Maev confirmed after the battle, looking at the goblins' bodies on the ground. We successfully eliminated all the goblins. Ethan nodded with satisfaction. Their work ended early, and they inadvertently found a shortcut for us to reach the target. His eyes passed over the corpses of the goblins. Thanks to their help, we can get closer to our goals faster. Maev looked at Ethan with doubtful eyes, as if asking why he was so interested in these goblins. Ethan understood her confusion and began to explain. They are the living map leading to the Black Dragon's lair, Ethan said as he bent down to pick up a bag left by a goblin. He opened the bag to reveal various metal ores inside. Look, these ores, mainly iron ore and precious source mineral veins, are all good materials for forging metal. Maev took a closer look. Indeed, those ores were hard and shiny, but no matter how many there were, she wouldn't be able to tell. After all, she was a priestess of the moon god, not a priestess of the god of craftsmen. This is why she seemed so obedient in front of Ethan. Ethan was well informed and could explain everything he saw. You mean these goblins are using these ores to make weapons? Maev asked doubtfully. Is it for the Black Dragon? But the Black Dragon already has powerful fangs and claws. Why would it need extra weapons? Ethan shook his head slightly and replied, No, what they were discussing just now was making armor. He paused for a moment, his thoughts returning to the description of Deathwing in the original book. That dragon was equipped with an additional set of full-body armor in addition to its own dragon scales, covered in iron from head to tail. I saw Neltharion once before in Black Crow Castle. At that time, in addition to dragon scales, he was wearing a layer of solid steel shoulder armor, Ethan explained. I guess these ores are used to build this layer of armor for him. Do you remember what the goblin said just now? Don't negotiate payment with a dragon. If there is really a dragon in the dragon clan that is willing to work together with the goblins, then this dragon is undoubtedly Neltharion. Maev's eyes lit up after hearing this. So, we are not far from finding him. Ethan nodded. Let's get going. Be prepared to enter the Black Dragon's lair and complete this difficult task as soon as possible. I even feel as if I can hear his heavy breathing. Maev silently prayed to Elune in her heart, hoping that everything would go well. Then, she took a deep breath, followed Ethan firmly, and embarked on the journey to find the Black Dragon. An Earth Guardian would never place its lair near another dragon of its own kind. According to the traces left by the goblins, the two continued to move forward. As they progressed, the number of surrounding peaks gradually increased, each one standing tall and towering into the sky. These peaks were completely different from the mountains in the world. They had not been baptized by time. The mountains, weathered by the vicissitudes of time, seemed to contain an ancient and powerful energy. Ethan stared at these peaks with an inexplicable awe in his heart. He felt that their formation was not due to natural forces, but shaped by some mysterious and grand power. One of the peaks caught his special attention. The north side of the mountain appeared to be neatly split open by an invisible giant blade, leaving a steep cliff. Ethan could clearly see the mottled texture of the ores on the rocks and the faint traces at the entrance of a cave. It seemed as if this was an ancient battlefield where gods and demons once fought. As far as Ethan knew, in a world called Tevat, there was a Lord Kengo Narukami, Lord Daigosho, who created a similar landscape. At the top of another mountain peak stood a strange crown. Its shape resembled a towering tree, with lush branches and leaves full of vitality. The scenery before him was truly breathtaking. Every inch of land and every stone seemed to contain endless mysteries. However, Ethan's attention soon shifted away from the scenery. He knelt down and began to carefully observe the land under his feet. For them, the most important task now was to find traces of Neltharion and uncover the secret of this black dragon. Chapter 758. The troops are divided into two groups. After following the traces all the way to this place, the trail left by the goblins had vanished. Ethan could only move forward cautiously, his eyes meticulously scanning for any possible clues in the surroundings. Despite his thorough search, he failed to find any valuable traces, and he began to doubt whether Neltharion would really reveal his whereabouts so easily. Perhaps this black dragon knew much more about this land than they had anticipated. It may have already hidden itself in this vast mountain range without leaving any traces. "Look at this!" Maev's cry broke the silence. Her eyes were fixed on a tiny mark, which looked extremely mysterious under the light. It bore some inexplicable similarities to baby dragon footprints, but this similarity seemed out of place in this situation. Ethan was also drawn to the mark. He squatted down and observed it carefully. This seems to be the mark left by the dragon's wings when they scratched the ground. Ethan frowned, but the corners of his mouth curled up. This is a good sign. Just as our intelligence suggested, Neltharion has other black dragons guarding him. However, most of the black dragons have chosen to leave Neltharion, which means there is only one dragon nest nearby, Neltharion's dragon kiln. Maiev knew that Ethan had not actually finished his thought. Finding the whereabouts of the black dragon was difficult, but getting close to him without attracting his attention was an even greater challenge. With the dragon soul in his possession, Neltharion would assume that anyone he saw was coming to snatch his treasure, making him extremely alert to any disturbance from the outside world. If they were not careful, they might expose their whereabouts. Therefore, they could not be careless and lax like Silas. They followed the mysterious trail cautiously. The scenery ahead became more and more shocking, and the outlines of mountains and rivers gradually blurred in their field of vision. Recalling the unparalleled power of Deathwing in the past, Ethan unconsciously slowed his pace. After all, Ethan had fought head-on with Neltharion before, and he could sense that the black dragon was hiding somewhere nearby. As the outlines of the mountains and rivers became increasingly blurred, Ethan suddenly felt Neltharion's aura. At the same time, he also noticed another darker force that was older and more evil, permeating the entire air and making people shudder. "There's something wrong with this place," Maiev frowned, looking around. Although she had never faced off against Neltharion, nor did she have Ethan's powerful perception, her keen intuition as a warrior still sounded the alarm in her heart. "Shh!" Ethan put his finger to his lips, signaling Maiev to stay quiet. She immediately understood, and both of them silently tensed their bodies, gripping their weapons tighter. The surrounding air seemed to solidify, and even the wind held its breath, daring not to break the solemnity. However, this silence did not last long. Soon, a rumbling sound came from deep within the tunnel. The sound was like the snoring of an ancient giant beast in its sleep, heavy and regular. "That's where the sound is coming from," Ethan whispered, pointing deeper into the tunnel. The two looked at each other and quickly and tacitly determined their goals. They walked carefully through the tunnel and finally came to the source of the sound. A huge cave appeared in front of them, and the scene was like a nightmare. Several enormous pits were scattered on the ground, with lava flowing slowly in them, as if the fires of hell were burning. Bubbles emerged from the deep pits from time to time, followed by puffs of orange-red smoke. The thick smoke intertwined in the air, forming a frightening picture. The lava was boiling hot, occasionally spewing out and splashing onto the burnt stones. Maiev made a hissing sound. "Wait, listen, it seems there's more than just that rumbling sound." She frowned, trying to capture more information. When I reached the entrance of the cave, they stopped simultaneously. Ethan nodded, confirming Maev's observation. In addition to the gurgling of lava bubbles and the hissing of lava splashing, another sound could be faintly heard from the depths of the cave. It was the rhythmic sound of a hammer hitting an anvil. Maiev closed her eyes and listened attentively. She realized that the sound did not come from just one hammer, but from multiple hammers working simultaneously. Moreover, among these knocking sounds, there were other noises. It was the sound of people talking, noisy and enthusiastic, as if they were discussing something important. The hammering continued, strong and powerful, as if a huge blacksmith were living in the mountain, working tirelessly. Ethan looked at Maiev, a hint of inquiry flashing in his eyes. "Do you want to go in?" Maiev did not answer directly with words, but her action of holding the moonblade tightly and preparing to respond to emergencies at any time silently showed her determination. Ethan led the way, and Maiev followed closely behind. They didn't walk far before they figured out who was knocking and hammering. Goblins again, but this time it was a large group. The cave was full of both skinny and strong goblins. Some goblins shuttled between huge barrels in the furnace, nervously and orderly pouring steaming metal liquid into a massive rectangular iron mold. The liquid churned in the mold, making a hissing sound. Other goblins wielded worn-out hammers, striking the red-hot iron plate heavily. The iron plate was heated to an unimaginably high temperature, as if it could ignite the surrounding air at any moment. A dozen goblins gathered together, hitting huge bolts with hammers, each strike making a deafening sound that echoed throughout the cave. In the busy intervals, the goblins muttered to themselves, as if chanting some mysterious spell. Their faces were covered with sweat, but their work never stopped. The voice of a goblin foreman was the most piercing in the noisy environment. "Hurry up! Everyone, work harder!" he roared. "Before the dragon wakes up, we must complete this order and run away." "That dragon?" Ethan and Maiev looked at each other. They had already gotten the exact information from the goblin's words. This was undoubtedly Neltharion's lair. Ethan and Maiev had finally found their destination. This discovery made Ethan's mind race, and he immediately formulated a plan. "Maiev, do you know?" he whispered. "This lair hides a sacred artifact known as the Pillar of Creation, the Hammer of Khazgoroth." "Pillar of Creation? What is that?" Maiev raised her eyebrows and looked at Ethan with interest. She enjoyed listening to Ethan talk about the secrets of this world, and it was these stories that made her believe in Ethan's fabricated past. The Pillars of Creation, as the name suggests, are artifacts left behind by the Titans, who are known as the Creators, Ethan explained. Each of them contains the power and wisdom they use to shape the world. The Hammer of Khazgoroth is one of the most powerful. It was created by the Titan Khazgoroth himself to shape the earth. When Neltharion was chosen as the guardian of the earth, this holy hammer was given to him to aid in his protection of the earth. Afraid that Maiev might not believe him, Ethan continued. "In fact, there is another pillar of creation that you may have heard of, the inherited holy relic of the high priestess of the Sisterhood of Elune, the Tears of Elune. There is a saying that Elune is also one of the titans of creation." "So what you mean is—" Maiev trailed off, looking at Ethan worriedly. Ethan looked at Maiev firmly. "Considering the danger of Neltharion, I decided to go deep into the nest first to find and try to unlock the Hammer of Khazgoroth. I believe that if we can successfully unlock and use it, we may be able to force Neltharion back and stop his crazy plan," Ethan said. After listening to Ethan's words, Maiev answered without hesitation, "Okay, I'll go with you." However, Ethan shook his head slightly and said solemnly, "Although it is not difficult to enter Neltharion's lair, it is a very challenging task to accurately find the seal location of the Hammer of Khazgoroth in this maze-like cave. More importantly, we must be careful during the process, because Neltharion may appear in front of us at any time. You stay here and monitor the goblins. Keep a close eye on Neltharion's movements. This is your mission and our safety guarantee." Ethan instructed, rejecting her request and immediately assigning Maiev a task. Although Maiev wanted to go deeper into the cave with Ethan, she understood the importance of staying behind to keep watch. She nodded and silently accepted Ethan's arrangement. They split into two groups. Maiev stayed to keep watch, and Ethan ventured deep into the cave. Before leaving, Ethan took out a badge with a faint glow from his pocket and handed it to Maiev. "This is a badge for telepathy. If you have any discoveries, such as Neltharion's appearance, or encounter danger, use it to report the news. Ethan explained. Maiev took the badge, held it tightly in her hand, and watched as Ethan disappeared into the depths of the cave. Chapter 759, Drogball and Infiltration. Ethan's luck was unexpectedly good. As he ventured deeper into the cave, he stumbled upon an unexpected discovery. Upon stepping into a relatively spacious chamber, he immediately caught the attention of several creatures with skin resembling stone. These beings turned their eyes awkwardly toward him, curiously eyeing the strange visitor. Grunt. Ooh! Unintelligible sounds emanated from the mouths of these ugly creatures, and Ethan guessed that these ferocious-looking beings might be the enslaved Drogbar. He felt a bit relieved, knowing that the Drogbar despised their enslavement by the Black Dragon and were always seeking opportunities to overthrow its tyranny. These enslaved creatures were natural allies to any force opposing Neltharion. Ethan scratched his head gently, looked around at the seemingly harmless Drogbar, and asked tentatively, "Do any of you understand the Kaldore language?" Although Ethan had a strong aptitude for learning and had tried to master many local languages since arriving in this world, he wasn't proficient in all the less common tongues. He certainly didn't speak Drogball. "I know some." A relatively short Drogbar stepped forward, attempting to express himself in broken Kaldore. "Who are you? Why are you here?" During the era when the Dark Knight Empire ruled ancient Kalimdor, Kaldore was the world's lingua franca and had become a widely used communication tool. This language was derived from the Titan language. Therefore, as a creation of the Titans, it wasn't surprising that some Drogbar who had contact with the outside world could master basic Kaldore. "Very well, it's you," Ethan said kindly to the 25-year-old Drogbar who knew the Kaldore language. "It is said that there is a very sacred hammer in this lair called the Khazgoroth hammer. Do you, or any of your companions, know where it might be hidden?" The Drogbar showed a confused expression. He scratched his head, trying to remember. "Khazgoroth. I have heard of it. What is that hammer?" He immediately asked his companions in Drogball, but unfortunately, all the Drogbar shook their heads, expressing ignorance. Their faces were full of confusion, clearly indicating they knew nothing about this legendary holy hammer. "Really don't know?" Ethan's tone held a hint of disappointment, but it was not unexpected. If the secret of the Pillars of Creation could be easily learned from an ordinary Drogbar, it would underestimate Neltharion's ability to control his subordinates. He shook his head, adjusted his expectations, and then gently said to the group of Drogbar, "Okay, if anyone in your tribe knows the answer to this question, or if anyone is eager to get rid of the Black Dragon's enslavement, please send someone to the Torrens Henan village and inform me. I will wait for your news there." Although the Drogbar looked ferocious and intimidating, upon closer contact, Ethan found their temperaments to be quite gentle. At least under the current circumstances, they showed no hostility or aggression toward Ethan, the sudden intruder. This also confirmed that Ethan's information was correct. The Drogbar were not very loyal to the Black Dragon Legion, and might also long for freedom and liberation. After asking and learning the route to Neltharion's true lair, Ethan transformed into an eagle under the curious and expectant eyes of the group of Drogbar. He fluttered his wings and ventured deeper into the cave. His figure gradually disappeared into the darkness, leaving only the echo of beating wings. "What are you doing here?" Less than 10 minutes after Ethan left, a Drogbar team riding lizards, covered with blue-gray scales, slowly approached the group of stunned compatriots. The leader was a burly warrior carrying 2 axes on his back. He looked around, assessing the situation. "Chief, a suspicious night elf broke in just now," a Drogbar explained with confusion. "He asked us about the path to the Master's lair." "Night elf?" The leader, known as Egril, frowned. What was his purpose, or coming here? What else did he ask? The short Drogbar who had been talking to Ethan hurriedly stepped forward and reported the situation in detail. He also mentioned Khazgoroth's hammer, saying that if anyone knew about it and wanted to get rid of Nessa, if Leo is a slave, he will send someone to Hezong village to inform him. "Oh?" A trace of surprise flashed across Egril's face. How could a foreign night elf know the secret of the hammer of Khazgoroth? At this time, an elderly Drogbar holding a stone staff noticed the subtle changes in the leader's face. He walked to Igrul and earnestly advised him in the tone of an elder. Igrul, please don't act too hastily. The time is not yet ripe. We need more information and preparations. The appearance of this night elf may be an opportunity, or maybe a trap. We have to be careful. So, when is the right time? Igrul's voice was full of anger and unwillingness. As soon as this topic was mentioned, a trace of anger flashed in his eyes, and the hands holding the two axes trembled slightly. The last Grey King was turned into a stone statue by Neltharion. He didn't even give us the chance to elect a new king. Igrul's voice became more and more passionate. What are we going to do with this crazy monster? How long will the Black Dragon's men endure the servitude? The old man looked at the angry leader and moved his lips, as if he wanted to say something, but in the end, it turned into a helpless sigh. He himself also knew that the Drogbar clan had been oppressed for too long, and their hearts were already filled with the desire for freedom. Igrul, I just hope you can think more about the consequences. The old man's voice was full of worry. We Drogbar can no longer afford to lose our leader again. Before taking action, we must at least ensure that the other party is an ally worthy of our trust. After listening to the old man's words, Igrul gasped angrily, trying to calm down his excitement. He understood the old man's worries and also knew that he shouldered the hope of the entire ethnic group and must be responsible for the entire ethnic group. Gradually, his mood began to calm down and his eyes became firm. He pulled the reins of the sitting lizard, turned the direction, and said decisively, I know what to do. I'm going to test the Night Elf's background to see if he is our true ally. You continue to do your best, be prepared, and wait for my news. I hope to gain the support of all the tribesmen on the day when I launch the uprising. Ethan once worried that the Drogbars would deliberately guide him in the wrong direction and lead him astray. However, it turned out that his worries were unnecessary. Those stone trolls, who looked ferocious but were actually honest, did not deceive him. The route they provided was accurate. As he continued to penetrate deeper into the core area of the lair, he found that the number of Drogbars was gradually decreasing. Finally, after he turned a corner, he saw the Black Dragon men in the lair for the first time. These dragon people were completely different from giant dragons and dragon beasts. They had a strange appearance, with 4 legs and 2 hands on their upper bodies. They were quite similar to centaurs, but their heads were still the heads of dragons. They were not native dragons, but transformed from mortals. These mortals once had great admiration for the dragon army and voluntarily were transformed into this strange half-human, half-dragon existence, and have served beside the dragon ever since. Although these dragon beasts that walked upright had a strange appearance, they undoubtedly had the blood of giant dragons. The dragon was also willing to hand over many important tasks to them, trusting their ability and loyalty. When Ethan suddenly appeared in the sight of this draconian of the Black Dragonflight, the Dragon Man was concentrating on taking care of the precious dragon eggs that Neltharion had left in the lair. The moment he saw Ethan, he was suddenly stunned. Obviously, he didn't expect to see a 10-song raptor in the Black Dragon's nest. However, this Dragon Man was not one to idle. He quickly recovered from his shock, picked up the long-handled weapon next to him, and shouted loudly. Stepping forward with his 4 legs, he rushed towards Ethan menacingly. Alarm! There is an enemy invasion. Everyone, be on alert immediately. The Dragon Man's cry echoed in the cave, breaking the original silence. Ethan realized that after being discovered in the closed cave, he could not fly straight to the core of the nest unimpeded. Who knew if he would encounter dragons who had mastered magic if he continued flying? He did not want to be attacked in the air. Moreover, it would be disastrous if the message spread and alerted Neltharion. So he decisively lowered his altitude and quickly changed his form in midair. When he landed, he had transformed into a huge and majestic chimera whose body was even larger than that of a dragon. Roar! The chimera roared loudly. The chimera's ability came into play, and the lion's roar instantly shocked the Dragon Man. At the moment when the Dragon Man had not yet recovered from his mental confusion, the chimera launched a charge as fast as a bolt of lightning. It instantly shortened the distance between it and the Dragon Man at an almost imperceptible speed. The sharp eagle claws drew a sharp arc in the air, and with unstoppable force, struck hard on the left side of the Dragon Man's body. Ethan's blow was extremely vicious. His eagle claws were like sharp blades, instantly leaving several deep cracks on the Dragon Man's armor. At the same time, the impact, like a blunt hammer, dented and deformed the armor. The force penetrated the armor's protection and directly severely damaged the Dragon Man's internal organs. Ouch! A scream echoed in the cave. The Dragon Man staggered under the huge impact and could hardly stand. However, despite being seriously injured, he did not give up resistance. He clenched the long-handled sword in his hand and struck at the Chimera with overwhelming force. Ethan was not afraid of this sharp blow. His hind legs kicked off the ground nimbly, and at the same time, he flapped his wings vigorously. At this moment, his huge body showed agility that was completely inconsistent with his size. He moved sideways to the left lightly, skillfully dodging the Dragon Man's sword. There was a loud clang sound as the broadsword hit the empty ground heavily, the echoes reverberating in the closed cave. After regaining his footing, the Chimera took advantage of its huge tonnage and suddenly collided with the Dragon Man, who had not yet withdrawn his sword. The impact of this giant beast caused the upper body of the Dragon Man, who was also quite heavy, to lean back, exposing the fragile skin of his unarmored neck directly in Ethan's sight. Ouch! At this critical moment, the Chimera pounced without hesitation, opened its big mouth, and bit the Dragon Man's neck fiercely. The sharp lion's teeth easily penetrated the Dragon Man's scales, and a stream of fishy blood immediately poured into Ethan's mouth. The Dragon Man raised his head and screamed, but he was unable to resist. Ethan became ferocious, shaking his head violently. There was a click sound, and half of the Dragon Man's neck had been bitten off by him. This fatal blow left the Dragon Man with no power to fight back. After the successful attack, the Chimera did not stop. He pursued his victory, stood up, put his palms together, and used brutal force to completely break the Dragon Man's neck, which was spraying blood. With a muffled sound, the Dragon Man's body fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 760, Perfect Infiltration. Bah! Chimera spat out the flesh and blood in her mouth, shaking her head vigorously to calm herself from the frenzy of killing. If it weren't for the fact that he was in the Black Dragon's cave and using magic would cause too much noise, Ethan wouldn't have chosen to transform into his wilderness form for melee combat. This was actually the first time he had truly fought hand-to-hand with an enemy in this form. During the battle, Ethan felt a rush of blood to his brain, but he tried hard to suppress the wildness in his heart. No wonder those druids say that druids who maintain the wild transformation state for a long time are easily dominated by their own wildness, Ethan thought to himself. In my normal form, it is absolutely impossible for me to bite the enemy with my teeth. But now, I seem to be immersed in this wild pleasure. Ethan didn't have time to dwell on the aftermath of his first battle in wild form. Although he quickly annihilated the Draconian he encountered by chance, the Draconian's alarm had already alerted the surrounding guards. With the keen perception given by the Chimera form, he could clearly detect the rhythmic vibrations and dull footsteps coming from the ground. Those were the approaching enemies. I don't have time to deal with you, Ethan thought, and his body shape changed instantly. Before the nearby guards could form an encirclement, Ethan had transformed from a mighty Chimera into a slender and dexterous snake, quietly disappearing from the dead Draconian and sneaking into the shadows. Asura! A roar broke the silence. The Draconian rushing at the front was obviously the leader. In appearance alone, he was different from other ordinary dragon soldiers. In addition to being taller, he also had a pair of black flesh wings on his back, indicating that he was closer to the dragon. When he saw his companion lying in a pool of blood, shock and anger intertwined on his face. "Search! Be sure to find the intruder before the master wakes up," the dragon captain ordered, with unquestionable authority in his voice. "You don't want to bear the master's fire, right?" The surrounding Draconians shuddered at his words. They were well aware of Neltharion's terror and the consequences of failing to complete the mission. "Yes!" All the Draconians responded in unison, their voices firm, but with a hint of trembling, and then they scattered and started searching nervously. "Huh? They are actually using the Kaldorei language instead of the dragon language? Ethan thought to himself, gaining a deeper understanding of the origins of these draconians. Sure enough, this confirms that these draconians were indeed transformed from night elves. It seems that whether it is 10,000 years ago or 10,000 years later, the Black Dragon's method of making minions has always been the same. At this moment, he thought again of his Black Dragon maid, who was clamoring all day long to create some subordinates. In fact, Ethan didn't go far. He took advantage of the small size of the snake to easily hide himself in a small hole nearby, lurking quietly, keeping an appropriate distance from the group of draconians and listening to their conversation intently. From their conversation, Ethan captured important information. Neltharion is still sleeping. It can be judged from their tone that the information I got before is accurate, he thought, feeling secretly pleased. Except for the clumsy Drogball and the draconians who stayed behind, there are no other people in the lair now. The dragon and the baby dragon are not there, or more accurately, they are unwilling to go near where Neltharion is. This is a good opportunity for me. The snake's unique sinuous crawling pattern gave Ethan the ability to stalk silently. He cleverly used this advantage to sneak past the group of unaware draconians. As he gradually penetrated into the core area of the lair, he sped up, moving with the grace and stealth of his serpentine form, determined to find out. Let me take a closer look at what precious treasures are hidden in the Black Dragon King's treasure house. Ethan thought with anticipation, his eyes shining with greed. He moved like a cunning snake, slithering flexibly through the dark lair, approaching the mysterious treasure house step by step. Crack! A soft sound echoed in the silent nest. Ethan, in his snake form, suddenly sank his sharp fangs into the neck of a solitary dragon man. The dragon man didn't even have time to react before collapsing. The snake, following its animal instincts, subconsciously licked the blood dripping from its fangs, tasting the scent of its prey. Ugh, this taste is really disgusting. Ethan couldn't help but think, but he knew this was the price he had to pay for the mission. He didn't even know which dragon man had fallen to his fangs. To reach the depths of the lair, he carefully navigated through the cave, advancing towards the core area. Along the way, he had to ambush several dragon men who blocked his path. His strategy was simple. If everyone is dead, no one can see him, ensuring perfect stealth. As he gradually approached Neltharion's chamber, Ethan noticed a strange phenomenon. The number of draconians had decreased, and the clumsy Drogbar were even harder to find. However, despite the decrease in numbers, the strength of the remaining dragon men had increased significantly. They were more vigilant, with higher levels, attributes, and combat effectiveness. Fortunately, Ethan could always launch a fatal ambush from behind, using powerful poison to quickly eliminate these troublesome foes. Even so, he did not dare to be careless. A patrolling dragon man might notice his presence at any time. In this dangerous lair, every step needed to be taken with extreme caution. His target, Neltharion's treasure trove, was hidden in the deepest part of the cave. However, at the end of the narrow passage leading to the treasure house stood two majestic gatekeepers, two huge dragon captains. They were like mountains, standing on either side of the entrance. These two dragon captains were completely different from the ordinary dragon men Ethan had killed before. Their bodies were majestic, more than 3 meters tall, and so imposing that they seemed capable of shaking mountains and rivers. Their entire bodies were wrapped in special silver-colored armor that shone in the firelight, with the brilliance of magic making it look indestructible. The two thick dragon wings behind them stretched out like eagles, demonstrating their majesty and power. Each dragon captain held a long-handled, double-edged axe, the blade gleaming with a cold light, as if it could split any obstacle. Ethan stared at them from the shadows, feeling the strong energy waves emanating from their weapons and armor. These were undoubtedly enchanted weapons given to them by Neltharion, making them even more formidable. Ethan quickly realized that he could no longer rely on his previous method of sneaking in by killing. A normal sneak attack on these two giants would be impossible. If the attack failed, he would be forced into a head-on battle with the dragon captains, which would inevitably cause a commotion. Therefore, he had to find another way to sneak into the treasure house quietly. After thinking for a while, still in his snake form, Ethan decided to take a risk and try a new infiltration method. He looked around cautiously, and after confirming that no dragons were nearby, he quietly slithered to a large stone next to the entrance of the passage. Here, he transformed again. Transforming into another form of chimera, a badger, Ethan found himself adapting to a new set of abilities. Badgers may not be as fierce as lions, as agile as eagles, or as stealthy as snakes, but they possess their own unique strengths. In this form, Ethan discovered that his front paws had become as hard and powerful as shovels, making digging his newfound specialty. After ensuring no dragons were nearby, Ethan began his excavation. His shovel-like forepaws moved with precision and speed, reminiscent of a skilled prayer, i.e. dog navigating underground. He wasn't just digging aimlessly. Whenever he encountered particularly tough terrain, he cast the druid spell, Fossils to Mud. This spell transformed hard stones and soil into easily manageable mud, clearing his path efficiently. While arcane magic could achieve a similar effect, using druidic spells in the Black Dragon's lair was more discreet and less likely to be detected by enemies. Ethan's excellent sense of direction and memory guided him as he tunneled underground like a nimble earthworm. Confident that he had distanced himself sufficiently from the two guards, he began to dig upward, aiming to resurface without drawing any attention.